Out of the gates and ready to go. Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow is underway on this Tuesday edition. Glad you're with us. If we're joining via YouTube, we say thank you. Enjoy it live. Right now, you can subscribe. Search out OutKick. If you're joining us on X, formerly known as Twitter, the one tweet you have right now, the live link, it's up. It's ready to go. Hop on the live stream and on this great radio partner as well. Hutton with you. Withrow is back tomorrow. He's enjoying a well-deserved day off. Crew here in Nashville always doing a phenomenal job, and a jam-packed show as usual. Coming up in 20 minutes, we talk all things college football with Trey Wallace of OutKick.com. Does great work for us and the site as our senior college football reporter. Later this hour, or coming up in an hour rather, Christian Hackenberg, former quarterback at Penn State. He joins us 1 hour from right now. Much to discuss with Penn State, the Big Ten, how he sees things stacking up across college football right now. John McClain, who's covered the NFL for 5 decades, Pro Football Hall of Fame selector, Pro Football Hall of Fame member. He'll join us and break down what was Week 5, heading into a pivotal Week 6, and the trade deadline just around the corner. And Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, he hops on with us as he does each and every Tuesday in hour number 3. Much to dive into, and we start with a big injury note across the NFL and maybe for the trade deadline. Justin Jefferson, he is headed to injured reserve. Hamstring injury suffered on Sunday against the Chiefs, fourth quarter, and only had 3 catches on 6 targets to that point. Went back and tried to get a second opinion, maybe a third opinion on the hammy, and they had mentioned in Minnesota they were going to try to protect him from himself. They weren't going to allow him to play if he couldn't go through the rest of that game, and of course he could not. And now he's placed on injured reserve, and he's out for at least a month or so. They decided to shut him down, and that leads Minnesota into a situation where they're down their best receiver by a mile, by the way. His 570 yards or so, even though he missed a portion of this game. It's well ahead of the next top targets in Minnesota, T.J. Hawkinson and Jordan Addison. What we've seen from Jefferson is better than those two combined. And in Jefferson's direction, whenever he gets the football, he gets over 10 yards per target. The other players well underneath that. So what about Kirk Cousins? What about the 1-4 Minnesota Vikings? Next up for them, the Bears, Niners, and Packers. The overtime loss to Kansas City shows you that they can compete. They were just winning close games last year. Now they're losing close games in 2023. And what does that set up for 2024? We know Cousins is unlikely to be back. In fact, the contract that we've seen for Hawkinson, we know they're going to pay Jefferson. And they've invested in Addison. They're likely to invest in another quarterback, maybe through the draft. At 1-4, going to Chicago, facing San Francisco, and then taking on Green Bay. The deadline happens right after the Packers matchup. What happens to this Minnesota team? What happens to Kirk Cousins? Is he on the move? It seems unlikely that the Jets would be involved in something like that. But if the Jets pick up another victory, who's to say they don't jump in the mix and try to make it back-to-back years where they're playoff contenders? I don't think the Jets are a playoff contender with Zach Wilson. I think the media wants to buy into that. And what they forget about what happened Sunday is they're playing the Denver Broncos defense. The Jets need a quarterback. The Jets could be in line to make a move, but it would take an outstanding performance by the Jets defense and maybe another crazy passing performance by Wilson to get a trade done. Again, they're investing a lot of money to Rodgers and the rest of that lineup. Probably not going to invest in the remaining contract for Cousins, who is a free agent after this season. And unless they can trade him, he will be highly sought after going into the offseason. Speaking of Jeffersons, Van Jefferson is the next receiver to discuss. He has been traded to the Atlanta Falcons. This according to Ian Rappaport and what was a late-round swap of picks. And Cooper Kupp returns for the Rams. He's back in the lineup. You have Puka Nacua, who is still doing great things. Somehow they found a way to get both on the field. Miraculous, I know, after all that talk. And Jefferson was out of the rotation on Sunday. He played, I think all of 2 snaps. And he wasn't really performing even whenever Cooper Kupp was hobbled with his injury. Tutu Atwell was getting more of that. There's a swap of 6th and 7th round picks in 2025 that sends Jefferson to Atlanta. And here are the Atlanta Falcons jumping into the mix for a receiver that has been good, not great, has flashed but hasn't been consistent. And he joins a group that's probably described in the same way in Atlanta based on the way they run their offense. He'll be paired with Drake London. He joins a group, of course, with a solid tight end in Kyle Pitts, who has not lived up to expectation. Jonnu Smith is starting to get some looks there, too, at tight end. Mac Hollins is there. But the Falcons are gaining another receiver that's a lot like the guys that they have. I'm surprised Kansas City wasn't involved, quite frankly. And the reason for that is what we've seen from their wide receiving core. The defending Super Bowl champions lack in this area heavily. I think they will be a player at the deadline for this position. No longer a juggernaut is how I would describe KC. And the reason for that is if they lose Kelsey, they're pretty much done. And not done in terms of being competitive. They have Patrick Mahomes who's going to keep them in games and win them games. I'm saying done from the, are we going to see Kansas City run it back? I had them running it back in the preseason. They're my Super Bowl prediction. I just thought we'd see more from a receiving group that was highly touted and quite frankly, highly paid, and we haven't seen that type of production. They're missing that true number one guy. Tyreek Hill, of course, but even Juju Smith-Schuster has not been replaced in this offense from a year ago. They have the $10 million per year guy in Marquez Valdez-Scantling. If you're like me, I have him on the fantasy roster. He's on the bench. He's not producing. 6 receptions, 100 yards. You have Sky Moore and Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice has been cool, been good, but not great. He's a role player, possession guy, speed guy, not a number one guy. Kadarius Toney. The thing we think about him immediately is week 1, Thursday night, and the drops against the Lions. He has to redeem himself. I think the Chiefs will be in the market. Van Jefferson, maybe you could say, is a lot like the guys we're describing here. I think the Chiefs need to be in the market for a receiver whenever things heat up. Davey Hudson joins us in studio. Davey, what do you make of the receiver news today across the NFL?
Definitely a blow for the Vikings as it relates to Kirk Cousins. While his future there is definitely just this season, I don't see a situation where they bring him back. He does have a no-trade clause. I thought it'd be interesting, if you want to kind of take a shot in the dark, send him back to Washington. Now, he's probably not going to agree to do that, but I don't like Sam Howell. They have some weapons on the outside.
Well, he didn't want to leave. He said he admitted he didn't want to leave Washington when he left.
It's under new ownership. Maybe they're able to strike a deal. That
he
might
will
be
go.
something.
Hey, he will go anywhere. He will waive the no trade. He will go anywhere. He will be paid. That guy has made a ton of money, guaranteed dollars, for being a quarterback that's known for not winning the big time games in the regular season when it matters, and forever didn't win in prime time, and last year was one and done in the playoffs.
I look at the NFC, and at this point, there are a few teams that I would be willing to strike out as far as playoff consideration goes because it's just not that great of a conference. And I definitely agree that having Kirk Cousins over Sam Howell would be a massive upgrade. As it relates to Van Jefferson, I'm not sure how good his run blocking ability is, but it has to be great because that's the only reason the Falcons would go out and get somebody.
Although Ritter threw for how many yards? Like 300 yards this past weekend?
He somehow,
against Houston?
he had a good performance.
I lost my guaranteed pick, my survivor pool pick.
Yeah, people, if you're unfortunate enough to own Falcons wide receivers, you were actually upset this 1 week in fantasy because they actually utilized them. But
they actually did it.
Terrible break for Vikings fans. And, I mean, you're at 1-4. The schedule's not exactly favorable coming up outside of the Chicago game, which at this point, that could still be a toss-up anytime you have those in-division opponents.
And Justin Fields has played well the last 2 weeks. That, to his credit, I know it's hard to believe, but he has done that.
Yeah, it's time for, use that first-round pick on Jordan Addison. I'm not a big believer in KJ Jefferson. He has a lot of opportunities, but he also has a lot of drops. So they'll be able to sling it. It's just whether the receivers will actually be able to make plays once they have the ball in their hands. That remains to be seen.
Coming up, David, we've got our predictions, maybe some adjustments on what we believe to be the college football playoff format and layout coming up in January. And last weekend, we saw the race for the college football playoff begin to take shape. And I'll give my perfect 4-team playoff for this year in just a moment. And then later, we'll get into who I actually am going to bet on for being there. But first, just some quick thoughts from me on what I've watched so far, and specifically just glancing through the last 3 weeks. Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr., fantastic. This past weekend, 163 yards, 8 or 9 catches, I believe. Aside from him, though, I'm still trying to figure out what else they have. I want to believe in the Buckeyes. I'm just not all in yet. North Carolina, Louisville, and Florida State are all unbeaten, and they do not play one another. What happens if they all remain unbeaten? It's not it is unlikely, not impossible. And here's Louisville, one of the best stories in college football. They just knocked off Notre Dame. They could be a playoff team. Again, unlikely, not impossible. And suddenly, look at the calendar. It's October the 10th, and it appears Alabama and Georgia, they've reclaimed their role as the top of the mountain in the SEC. If Alabama beats Tennessee, they have a path to the playoff if they just simply went out in the regular season. Georgia, they finally showed us who they are in the beatdown of Kentucky. Chad crushed this in his analysis and preview of this game last week. Carson Beck passed for nearly 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. Brock Bowers, 7 catches, 130 yards. 51-13 is the final score over Kentucky. Beck became the first Georgia quarterback since Aaron Murray, which was, 2012, 2013. 3 straight 300-yard passing performances. He's got 11 touchdowns, 2 or 3 interceptions on the season. That's through 6 games. The offense continues to get better. The offense has produced when it mattered in second halves, even when they weren't playing very well early in games between the hedges. And now it's a defense that looks more like a great group over the last 6 quarters. Georgia seems like Georgia. And then there's, Ole Miss. Not getting enough credit because they lost to Bama. First 2-1 start in conference play, though, for Lane Kiffin. And a chance to finish 10-2, with the only losses being to Bama and Georgia. Again, unlikely, not impossible. LSU and USC are both very, very confusing to me. They won last weekend, close, great games, great college football games. You're a football fan, you love them. Their defenses, though, they're just too bad to make them any legit contenders for their conference, let alone for the college football playoff. And Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley have some massive issues. They're not going to compete in the Pac-12 or the SEC when it is in regards to trying to win their conference title and go on to the conference championship, and the national championship playoff. And then for USC, I think it's more telling for me this past weekend. TCU had a lot of those survive and advance type games. They had like 5 or 6 of those last year. That did not feel that way to me against Arizona for USC. This was more of a warning sign. And I look ahead to their schedule. They've got Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has a solid chance to pull the upset this weekend. Warning signs there that USC is just not elite. They're elite on offense. They're great on offense, just not on defense. And Oregon and Washington, Pac-12, are we going to see a team finish undefeated? I mean, I doubt it. Based on the competitive nature of that conference, it's been really, really good. But it does play into my favorite, the matchups I'm wanting to see in the college football playoff for what I'm rooting for. And it starts in the Pac-12. Is there a scenario where we could see 2 teams get into the college football playoff from the Pac-12? Sure. I'm hoping for it. I'm not putting my money behind it, but Washington and Oregon, they're at the top of the conference. Let's say it's the game of the year. and then the loser of this weekend's game ends up beating the winner in another close matchup in the Pac-12 title game. Penn State is arriving to the top of the Big Ten, or at least they think they are. They have a chance to do more than just play spoiler, and we'll get into that with Christian Hackenberg coming up a bit later. Can Penn State claim that top spot? This is the year to do it. This is the year to take advantage. Can they do it? Can James Franklin do that? And then what if Georgia just isn't the Goliath? What if we haven't seen them really show who they are and they drop a game? What if they lose a game, then lose in the SEC title game to a 2-loss Bama, for instance? What happens if Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan all finish with a loss and then the Big Ten title game doesn't go as planned? Texas and Oklahoma. Imagine a two-team representation for the Pac-12 and the college football playoff, either Texas or Oklahoma, because I think they'll rematch in the Big 12 championship game. They're both headed to the SEC. You've got Oregon and Washington again headed to the Big Ten. And then there's Penn State, who we haven't seen to arrive to this level yet. Or can it be Florida State that can crack through the ACC? The conference's losing teams to the Power 2 would actually see, in my pipe dream of a scenario, actually see big-time success, only to lose out to those same conferences the following season. It feels, though, like it's that type of year across college football. It's been a blast, and there's some big matchups ahead. Trey Wallace joins us next. We'll dive in to the week that's ahead. That's next, right here on Hot Mic.
Now, yesterday, in the wake of the Trevor Bauer bombshell outing his accuser as a disgusting liar, I made the call to end the Me Too movement. And today, I'm going to continue making that case. What was once born as a push to protect real victims has, in many cases, just like we saw with Bauer, turned into an awful manipulation tactic by immoral women to strip men of their power. And we, as a society, continue to just let it happen. Time and time again, it seems. Such also, as we have seen in the past, the cases of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was on the brink of not being confirmed after being accused of sexual assault stemming from his college years. There was the 3 members of the Duke lacrosse team who were accused of raping a stripper at a party, and former Bills punter Matt Araiza, who was accused of gang rape. These are just 3 examples, all of which were proved to be untrue accusations. Men have been put through absolute torture. They have had massive opportunities stolen from them. Their lives, livelihoods, and reputations devastated solely because they were Me Too'd. Meaning a woman made a claim and it was accepted as a fact, even though in all of these cases, it was nothing but a lie. The believe all women era, no matter what, must end right now. Even Matt Araiza, who was still out of a job in the NFL, realizes the threat of it. Here's what he said after being released from the Bills following his untrue accusations.
It's just the climate of how things are now. Accusations bring so much hate to anyone who decides to stand by the accuser that they were kind of forced to cut me from the team.
Now, don't get me wrong. If you are a true victim, I implore you to find the courage to come forward under any and all circumstances. However, if the behavior with the accused man was consensual, let's say, if there is an ulterior motive, maybe a money grab, a play for attention, then please spare us. Don't take the legs out from under real victims who now will no doubt have become discredited because of stunts like the ones I just mentioned. Real victims should be absolutely furious. Just because a woman says something does not mean it should be assumed as fact. And to everyone out there, be careful. Save those receipts. Finally, I also see no reason to continue a movement to protect women when women don't even take the steps to protect themselves anymore. For example, self-proclaimed feminists all over the country are in favor of having biological men in their bathrooms, in their locker rooms, in their sorority houses, in their safe spaces. And even those who aren't outwardly in favor still neglect to stand up against things like this, despite the integration causing an inherent danger for all women. Look how Virginia dad Scott Smith was treated after he confronted the Loudoun County School Board in Virginia after his 15-year-old daughter was the victim of a brutal sexual assault by a transgender in a female bathroom. So, how is this dad going to be attacked when he was standing up for his underage daughter? I don't understand it. Where is the concern for this girl's safety? Isn't this a Me Too concern considering she was sexually assaulted? No, it's not. And that is the problem right here, because you can't pick and choose which girls and women get protection under this awareness campaign. And on the flip side, who can be classified as an assailant?
Sixth and Peabody, our location with E-Hop Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Hot Mike with Hunting Withrow rolls on across the OutKick network. Trey Wallace of OutKick.com is the senior college football reporter. He joins me now. Trey, another exciting weekend, man, both last weekend and the one coming up. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing good, buddy. It's always great to join you, Jonathan. Yeah, man. I'm staying up till 2:30 in the morning, working, watching to see if USC is going to lose. And now we get another crazy week where, USC is one of the primetime games, with Notre Dame coming up. So it just, a lot of craziness in college football. And don't forget, Deion Sanders, 10 o'clock Friday night, ESPN. Should be fun.
No doubt. Hey, also fun is, Alabama. And look, their games are sloppy. Milroe has been fun to watch the last two games since he was benched. And then on the flip side, it looks like Georgia is the Georgia that we expected to see finally in their blowout win over Kentucky. Are we starting to see the separation again at the top between these two programs and the rest of the group?
It's interesting, how things played out. That was a curb stomping in Athens. To me, that was finally Georgia putting it all together on offense and defense from the start, not lackadaisical waiting for the second half to get going. That's a big thing that stood out to me for Georgia is, Carson Beck and the way he was able to spread it out with receivers and whatnot. And that offense was clicking. And the Kentucky thing, too, is, Kentucky just wasn't as good. We sort of saw that coming with their schedule. But it doesn't mean they can't be a good team. It's just they got shut down. I think Texas A&M, Alabama, I thought Texas A&M was going to win that football game. Before it started, I think Alabama kind of asserted their dominance in the second half when it came on defense. I mean, you look at all the penalties and how sloppy Alabama was for the entire game. But then you look at how they got after Texas A&M. And it really forced Max Johnson, into some mistakes when it comes to protection, quarterback for Texas A&M. And look, Jalen Milroe is, he's one of those quarterbacks, man, that you can't underestimate him because he's going to come back and he's going to punch you right back in the mouth. And that's something I'm learning. I think we're all learning with Alabama and Jalen Milroe this season is that the offense is going to look different like each game. It just depends on who you're playing on defense, Jonathan. And, for me, it's and I always thought this was just so I'll be nice and say naive, maybe is the best way to put it. But the folks that said, okay, after the Texas lost, all right, this is Nick Saban. He's going to end the career this year. He's going to retire. He's going on Pat McAfee. He's doing more media. He's more calm and more, energetic and smiling more. I just think the guy's enjoying the college football season. I don't think it has to do anything with retiring. So, look, 3.5 weeks ago, everybody was wanting to dig Nick Saban's grave. Now he's sticking his hand out of the grave and saying, no, not so fast. We have a team that could play for an SEC championship this year. And if they don't drop another game, I heard your conversation with Dan Mullen yesterday, Jonathan, and I thought it was fascinating. It could get very tricky once we get down to that final weekend in November, heading into title weekend that following week.
Yeah, and the conference championship games are going to matter more. It seems like the weight will be on those games a lot more, especially if you consider, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility a 2-loss SEC champion could come out of Atlanta. You know, like just how the season's gone. And how would the committee choose a 2-loss SEC title team against a 1-loss Pac-12? You got a 1-loss Big Ten. Again, 1-loss ACC. And either the winner of Texas, Oklahoma, which feels like we're headed towards that rematch too later. That to me is a massive storyline.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of a dose of reality that the SEC is not going to get 2 teams in the playoff this year.
Yeah,
I think the way we can look at that right now and the schedule and how things are going to play out, it's going to be really hard to do. There's going to have to be, the Pac-12 is going to have to fall apart. I don't expect that to happen. Oregon and Washington are going to play this weekend in a 7-8 matchup. Whoever loses that game is not out of the national championship race. They'll probably drop a spot, if it's not a blowout. And then you look at USC. You're talking about the Pac-12 having to go to Notre Dame this weekend. Can the Irish respond? In my opinion, I think they were just overly exhausted over those previous 2 weeks, and now they get USC at home coming off that loss to Louisville. It's just a lot can happen, especially in the Big Ten. What is the trifecta of Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan going to look like? And then we talk about the ACC and the teams that don't have to play Louisville. So are we setting up now for some weird scenario at the end where could there be like a undefeated ACC team not involved somehow in the playoff, or if they are involved? Is it going to be a head-to-head matchup type? It just a lot is changing in college football, and I think it's good for the sport. And I think that, can Michigan get back? That's the biggest thing right now that's in the back of my mind. It's like, can Michigan get back to the playoff for a 3rd time in a row, and can they finally do something with it? I think we're going to start finding out soon once they play a little bit of a tougher schedule, but Jonathan, I'm right there with you, man. We're in a flux of just crazy college football times in a sense of how things are going to play out towards the end of the season. I think that's what's going to make the last 7 weeks so exciting.
What do you make of Oregon and Washington and what could be the best regular season matchup of the entire college football season?
How crazy is this going to be? I mean,
it's going to be awesome.
Up in Washington, in the Spokane area, and you've got, I think it's a 7-8 matchup, according to the latest polls. And this is, one of those games where you expect, like, for the Pac-12 championship.
Yes.
You don't think it's going to come, during, the second week of October. I look, just on paper, Bo Nix versus Michael Penix Jr., you can't get that's a show right there. Like, everybody's been talking about Dion and they're putting on a show. No. Wait till Saturday afternoon when those 2 teams face off. That's going to be I think it's going to be the best game of the day. I think it'll beat out USC, Notre Dame, and whatnot. And I look at it, it's an offensive fireworks show. And the biggest thing is, which defense is going to be the one that steps up? It's not going to be an eliminator. That's one thing for sure. It won't be a title eliminator. Because I don't think USC is good enough, in my honest opinion, to not drop 2 games. I see them losing 2 games, and it could start this weekend in South Bend, which, Jonathan, makes that Oregon-Washington game so important.
Yep, and then, of course, Louisville beating Notre Dame opens the door for what could be you've got the top 3 teams in the ACC that don't play one another. It's a bizarre round robin that we're not going to see. And then you have the spoiler aspect of the real craziness can happen based on what could take place down the road for the Tennessee Volunteers. They're not going to me, Trey, they're not the team that's going to Atlanta. But what happens if they pull one of those upsets against Bama on the road in Tuscaloosa? If they beat Georgia, let's say Georgia's not the Goliath, and here's A&M coming to town in a really interesting matchup, the 3:30 game on CBS. The Aggies are 1-8 on their last 9 road games, and they're going to Neyland in what's going to be a very interesting football game.
Yeah, 3:30 on Saturday. It's going to be pretty wild. I think when you look at Texas A&M, I think they've kind of been exposed so far. I think what they did in Miami and then what happened, this past weekend when everybody thought that they were going to beat. And I'm talking about everybody within the program thought that they were going to beat Alabama. You come off that high, and then now you got to go back to back, and you got to go to Neyland, where Tennessee's feeling it right now, and they're trying to figure out the next steps on offense without a Brew McCoy, but they still got a really great rushing attack. You got an offensive line that's being put back together now with Cooper Mays. It's back. I just think that game is going to be Tennessee's to lose. I think that they have enough on offense. I think they have enough on defense to get after Max Johnson. Now, you brought it up. The crazy part here is, what if Tennessee goes down to Tuscaloosa and Alabama is beatable? So I can, this is not Alabama teams about. What if Tennessee goes to Tuscaloosa and pulls off that win? And then let's just say Tennessee's hot, so we'll take the Alabama game. What if they beat Georgia at home? You said,
if Milton has the game of his life in one of these games.
Right, and you got a receiver that goes off like we saw Hyatt do last year. Maybe not 5 touchdowns, but maybe 3.
Right.
I'm just saying it could get crazy. And what it's going to do is it's going to throw the SEC into flux, because then you're going to have a one-loss Tennessee team, maybe.
Well, then it opens it for Ole Miss again. It just kind of in the Bama scenario, it could get really, and it feels like that type of year, and not just in the SEC, but across the board. Penn State's going to have a lot to say in the Big Ten.
I don't know if it opens it up for an Ole Miss or even an LSU. And by the way, LSU just won conference loss. You know what I mean? So, you look at all the different variables in this situation. There are probably 4 or 5 teams that could benefit out of somebody from the East, taking care of somebody from the West. And then we've seen that in years past, but also at this standpoint, this thing, when it comes to the college football playoff, if Georgia drops a game and they go into that SEC title game and you got to face a 2-loss SEC West team, it's going to be very interesting to see the dynamics of the college football playoff heading into that and where we are as college football, the top 5 rankings in the country. So because of all the big games we get later in the season and the rivalry games, Jonathan, so it's going to be a little maddening. It's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking for some teams, but this next 7 weeks, man, this is going to be something to tune into, because I think for the first time in a very, very long time, we have a lot of parity in college football this year, and the dominant conference might not be the SEC as a whole.
Also, Missouri, but despite the loss, seeing what we saw from Cook and Burden, they can also, like I mentioned Tennessee with Georgia, Missouri's going to give both Tennessee and Georgia struggles.
I don't want to say Georgia. It wouldn't surprise me if Missouri beats Tennessee. Just like it wouldn't surprise me if, Kentucky, Missouri had this crazy game this weekend, and all of a sudden, I'm just saying there's so much, I think there's so many questions in the SEC, because what do we think going into the Georgia-Kentucky game? We think, okay, this is the Georgia team that really hasn't pounced on anybody yet, the kind of lackadaisical on offense in the first half. And they just came out and they just beat down Kentucky. But can they do that consistently? That's the thing that stands out to me. We have not seen Georgia do it consistently through 5 or 6 games this season. So if they can, they're going to be playing in Atlanta. If not, somebody's going to catch them, and there might not be only one team.
Well, and you bring up Georgia and the Kentucky matchup again. Like Stoops was asked about this, right? Was the coach's show? And he said, hey, and you wrote about this at OutKick. They bought some good players, and they're a really good football team.
He's speaking truth as well.
Yeah.
That's
an obvious point.
That's an obvious point. And I think it rubbed some folks the wrong way because it came off a loss to Georgia. And I think it also rubbed some folks the wrong way because when he was talking about, we got to get some better players and whatnot, it's kind of like, oh, you're crapping on your roster. I think that's how fans look at it. And
he's brought in Will Levis and Devin Leary at quarterback too. So,
where did he get his starting running back from this year?
Right.
I think NIL was a factor in that. So I'm just saying, I think he was truthful. I think it was the wrong time to probably come out and say, not like Mike Gundy, who's out here telling folks, I wrote about that. It just came out a little bit ago. Hey guys, don't invest in the school. Don't invest in facilities and weight rooms and all that. No. Just give all that money towards NIL because we need it. We got to go out and buy players.
Loxley was saying that too at Maryland. He's like, hey, we open up this mega facility. Doesn't really mean all that much in recruiting anymore.
Isn't it
No big
wild,
deal.
How the times have changed where we're not talking about game rooms, we're not talking about weight rooms, we're not talking about, in at Tennessee, 15 minutes from where I'm from right now, they're building a whole new section of their athletic, complex. And when all reality, maybe if Josh Heupel was honest about that, he might say the same thing as Stoops and maybe Gundy does.
Well, unlike those, Heupel gets both. He's got the collective and he has the facilities behind him.
Isn't it? It's a question that's going to have to be answered down the road, and I'm very curious. And we'll talk about this further, I'm sure, on another day. But how much are athletic departments suffering right now from having to make the decision? Fans and donors do we give to the collective or do we give to the school?
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think that's the biggest thing that kind of stands out to me the most.
Trey, always great, man. Keep up the great work. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks, buddy. Have a great week.
Same to you. There's Trey Wallace, OutKick.com. Coming up, what a night for the Braves and what a finish. That's next.
I'm here at the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, but that's not the only big race that's on people's minds. Let's go talk about it.
There's no way Biden can win again. There's just no way. Even the people that voted for him because they didn't like Trump, now at least have to see senile, not all there, probably won't be alive for 4 more years.
Are you a Trump guy? Or are you a DeSantis guy? Or someone else?
I don't like any of them.
Who's your dream candidate? Who would you want to run?
Myself. I think the best candidates probably are smart enough not to run.
I just hope there's somebody that's young enough to care about the country instead of their politics.
My fear is they get Gavin Newsom from California. And I think it would be the new cool vote for the younger people, and that's what I don't like.
Who do you think on the Republican side would be able to take on Gavin Newsom?
Great question. As a Republican registered, I love what Trump's body of work did, but they're just out to get him and destroy him, and we won't get things done, which is crappy for me to say. I thought DeSantis was going to be the guy. Trump only has 4 years left. He cannot fix everything that just happened in 4 years. And he's going to be battling indictments and all these false stuff for the next 4 years. We won't get anything done. And it'll just be the stalemate in America. That's why I almost don't want him in. But if he is the leading candidate, that's who I'm going to vote for.
Is there any Democrat that you would vote for, consider voting for?
Absolutely not.
What about RFK Jr.?
No.
Who should our first female president be?
Michelle Obama, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Harambe 2024.
We have the 2024 presidential race coming up, and I wanted to see who you thought your favorite TV characters would vote for. Homer Simpson, who do you think he would vote for?
Donald Trump, all the way.
Vito Corleone.
Whoa. Whoever advances the cause of the Corleone family. Yeah.
Tony Soprano. If Tony Soprano is voting in the 2024 election, who do you think he's voting for?
I'm going to go Ron DeSantis.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Just seems like a Ron DeSantis kind of guy.
Is this a meatball joke that you're trying to make right now? What about Homer Simpson?
Homer would vote for Biden because he's a dope.
Who do you think Napoleon Dynamite would vote for?
That's a good question. I actually don't know.
There's a right answer here.
He's voting for himself or Pedro.
There's a Viking show, I think.
Okay.
Maybe that's Hulu. I don't know.
So in the Vikings show, whatever the main character is, who do you think they would vote for in 2024?
Probably a goat or a dog.
I think we have one of those in office right now. So who do you think Jon Snow would vote for in this upcoming election?
I'm going to say Donald J. Trump.
Why do you think so?
Because Game of Thrones is all about about drama, and Trump comes with the drama, baby.
Would you vote for Trump from jail?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. Because at that point, what else do you have to lose?
Okay, would you vote for Trump from a jail cell?
Yeah, baby, I will get Trump out of jail.
Would you vote for Trump in jail?
Oh, yeah.
Based as
The thing that Trump needs to remember is there's another political figure that said, I don't recall very well.
Yeah.
And that's all he's got to say.
Is there like a dream candidate, someone that you think could like save us all?
Yeah, Jesus.
Amen to that.
Coming up, Christian Hackenberg will join us. If you're joining us on YouTube, we say thank you. You can subscribe to the channel. If you found the one link we're tweeting out today on OutKick, thank you for that as well. Hot Mike with Huth and Withrow rolls on. Chad back with us tomorrow here on the show. And we've got John McClain coming up in about 40 minutes, too. Davey Hudson joins us as we go into the top headlines of the day. Carlos Correa, well, making some history. Congrats. The villain of Major League Baseball. Is he really a villain of Major League Baseball? Let's first say that. Yeah, he's making history about he's passing Derek Jeter and David Ortiz with his 2 RBI in Game 2. He's now has 63 runs batted in now in the postseason. And, of course, that is helped by the sign stealing. But I mean, Major League Baseball and the commissioner gave him the free pass. Everybody here is, just welcome to set records. And, while he's not going to the Hall of Fame because there are voters who, hold the right to vote on the Hall and never even vote on anyone. I say big deal. He's surpassing these guys because Major League Baseball allowed it to happen.
I don't think he's like the main villain for the MLB, but the fact they're asking him about this afterwards and he's saying like, man, I got to let that sink in. That's huge news where it's like, well, I think it would be interesting. I don't know if anyone's actually calculated the number of RBIs that he had during that stretch that added on to it. But just based off everything we do know, it's definitely like, I would say probably 70% of records in Major League Baseball. Like I'm putting an asterisk next to it.
Yeah, but exactly.
My
you have the
thing
asterisks.
here,
like the entire game right now has how many asterisks next to players?
That's the thing for me. It's like what?
I just don't give a damn about this. Because Major League Baseball is this.
Well, we talked about it yesterday, Hut, with like the year where they were mixing different types of baseballs that were being thrown out there. It's like, why do I care about any of these records that you all have whenever I can't trust that any of them are legit to begin with, based off playing by the rules of the game?
Right. Right, and they all, the high and mighty, the old school mentality of the, baseball's about the records. Well, okay, great, but every year we're going to see this with an asterisk, with some player, because again, when this stuff happens, you're allowed to just continue to play. That's how they treated this. A-Rod rolled on during all the HGH and that investigation rolled on players. No one was Ryan Braun, I believe, was suspended for a slight amount of time, and there was one other, and that was it, I believe. Was it Manny Ramirez and Ryan Braun?
That sounds right.
There was a lot more than that going on. I mean, miraculously, right now in the age of sports wagering, we're suspending players in college football and in the NFL, and miraculously, no one bets in Major League Baseball. No one gambles.
The thing
you just
for
only
me
focus
too,
on what you want, and in this case, it was banging on a trash can in Houston.
And with Major League Baseball, I mean, they'll have records that go back to the early 1900s where I'm just like, it's a completely different game. I don't even know why we even look to these records. Yeah, it's cool if you want to be a historian of the game and you like to keep up with that. But as far as them flashing a graphic on the screen of like, wow, this is the first time this has happened since 1908, I don't give a damn.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you totally. Now, what I do care about is the finish last night in Atlanta.
Electric.
That is a game. You know, they come from behind victory, down 4. They win 5-4 Braves over Phillies. And the way it happened with the incredible double play where Harris traveled, 96 feet, was it? I mean,
every
catches
bit of
it
room
at the
he had.
wall, throws back. They get the double play at first with Harper. And the way Harper was busting it, too, to get back. I mean, the whole thing was insane. And that has been the season of the Atlanta Braves. That has been the season, really, of the top of Major League Baseball. It's been a very, very entertaining and fast-paced game. And that's what I want as a former all-in baseball fan growing up and the casual one that's tuning in now. Give me reasons to watch. Give me the thrill ride. And they're doing that this year.
They got down 4-0. It looked as though the offense was anemic once again, and I don't know if they made a sacrifice to Joe Boo or what, but they ended up having the bats wake up, and
that's what they do, man.
It was one of those. I mean, I turned it off, and I saw people just being like, "Man, the Braves, postseason comes, Phillies are able just to shut them out again," and then I actually was able to see that final play live, and I mean, Harper, it's one of those things where we might go back. Again, they were still down a run, but does that come back to be the moment the series turned, and it's just now the Braves are on their way to winning a World Series? I mean, that was definitely just also whenever Harris threw that ball back, it went through 2 guys before, who ended up scooping that up and throwing it to Olsen? I'm drawing a blank. It might have been Riley. I think Riley was the guy who ended up catching it.
Who also hit the homer?
Yeah, he also had that. So it was just an electric finish, and happy for Braves fans. You're able to watch that one live after what you'd seen the first really game and a half of the series.
And no one thought he was going to get to the ball. That was the other thing. Harper or the Phillies manager, they all admitted crazy that he tracked it down and then doubled him up. And then to have the game in that way was also incredible.
Yeah, close it out on that double play.
Never seen anything like it. And that's the other thing about the game. I'm talking about the history of the game. There are days, plural, every season where you see something you've never seen the game before. That's the history and the facts from 1902 or whatever that I want to hear about, right? Not something like if Correa is, if he is the outlier that doesn't need to be mentioned in the record books, then I don't know why we're propping him up as that in the post-game interview. And I'm sure he does have to think about it for a bit.
I hope we got some other good games tonight. And I know early on we looked at a lot of series, 2-0. It's just, let's make these eventful, because I do think the MLB broke their record for attendance and streaming this season. So it's the rule changes have helped as far as making the game more enjoyable for fans and bringing people to their TV sets or watching the game live. So I just want a good postseason to kind of end that out if you want to talk about growing and helping the game out.
So Dan Orlovsky, who is a friend of the show, great guy, love his analysis. He's on Get Up, and for whatever reason, we can't play the audio or the video of this. Audio is where I would point to. Normally, we'd be able to do that. We're told we can't. On Get Up, speaking on the behalf of the Patriots, Orlovsky and Rex Ryan are going back and forth. And Orlovsky, who is known for being the quarterback that steps out of the end zone, for whatever you want to say about his playing days, the dude, he loves the game, and he does great work in analyzing and telling you about what he's seen. I think he communicates that well. And while Rex Ryan is discussing all that's wrong in New England and puts the blame on Mac Jones, Orlovsky jumps in on Get Up and says, well, if Mac Jones was in San Francisco, he would be playing like Brock Purdy. And then that's, of course, erupts into this, you got to be kidding me, Dan O, you got to be kidding me from Rex Ryan. Look, it's not a coincidence that the former quarterback is saying this about the quarterback and the former coach is backing Belichick and blaming the quarterback, not the coach. That's first and foremost. Second, while Orlovsky may be taking it a step too far, saying it's Brock Purdy, because I don't think Purdy gets enough credit, I also don't think Mac Jones is the place to point the blame in New England either. Think about the coaching scenario that they put on him in year 2. And now just look at the talentless and depthless Patriots roster right now on offense. And you think to yourself, okay, put him with the star-studded blue chip players that are around Brock Purdy and the offense and the coaching that's a part of the 49ers in San Francisco. Yeah, Mac Jones would be pretty damn good. And, you know, not every quarterback goes in there and is good. Just ask Trey Lance, who they give away to Dallas. But, Davey, I wish we could play the audio because it was great instead of just recapping, being a recap show for ESPN every day. But, you know, he's not wrong, but he's not giving Purdy enough credit either, Orlovsky here.
Purdy definitely surpassing everyone's expectations, but it is a good conversation to have whenever we discuss everything that is built around San Francisco and what they have in place on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And when you look at Kyle Shanahan, most people would argue he's top 3 play caller on offense in the league. So they're doing a great job of working towards his strengths. But, I mean, of the 32 starting quarterbacks right now, Hut, how many do you think could actually step into that situation in San Francisco and look as smooth and as effective as we've seen Brock Purdy so far? Because I think it's actually a higher number where I'm trying to let's throw Brock Purdy onto the Patriots right now. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, let's throw just flip it though. I mean, there's only a handful of quarterbacks, and it would be the elite of the elite. That's what what Brady did, where you've got more pick sixes right now in Mac Jones's career than Brady had in his entire tenure in New England, or losses since Brady left. They've had more losses than Brady had losses in the regular season. That comparing it to that is not fair to where the expectation level should be, but I mean, they haven't scored a touchdown in their last 34 drives, and he's been benched now in 2 straight games. There are not many quarterbacks, though, that you could place in New England, and they would have success either.
And it's been one of those situations where the coaching has not helped them. I thought bringing in Bill O'Brien would – I mean, it was hard for it to be worse than it was last season, but it seems like they're kind of on track for that.
Yeah, but I think the thing to remember about – and you're right. I mean, it should have settled in. They also could have brought in more talent with this group and with Bill O'Brien. They've had now back-to-back weeks like this for the first time since 1996. I mean, it's not like we thought it could be bad. We didn't think it to be top 3 pick bad.
Yeah.
But if you have top 5 elite quarterback talent, things can be hidden. But this ball club just lacks blue chip talent just about anywhere. Yeah, I mean, if you think about the lack of skill at the wide receiver position, speed, the fact that they don't invest in running back, and their defense is now depleted. It was a team where the defense could keep them in games, have them hang around. It's a lot. They're built in a similar fashion to the Tennessee Titans. They want to be a run-first team, be sharp up front on the offensive line, win in the trenches, and on defense, keep it a field goal game. Allow the offense to go down. And honestly, they did that over the first couple games of the season. New England, they had the ball for whatever reason. Philadelphia went for it on that 4th and 1 at midfield. They had the ball to go win at the end of that game. And then the following week, I think they had another possession where they could have. They ran out of time. They had a lateral back to the offensive lineman. His knee was down as they're stretching for the first down. Anyway, I mean, the defense has done what it could with the talent that they had when healthy, and now you got Judon, who's not going to be back until December. They're in as bad of a shape roster-wise as any team in the AFC right now.
Very much so, and it just kind of comes back to you often see this happen with several coaches where once they start to take over the general manager position, it just does not work out for, while they might still be a good coach from the X's and O's standpoint, it just doesn't mesh. And we've hit this point about 3 years ago for Bill Belichick, and we've talked about it. This is likely his last year in New England.
I think so, yeah. I'm buying into that now.
And I mean, it's been a great run. It's been 2 decades worth, so it's hard to maintain that level of success in any sport. So the fact now it's coming to an end, I know all Patriots fans would be like, yeah, I would do it again. But we're at the end of the road, and they've got a lot of stuff they need to do as far as what happens next with this organization, because the general manager and the head coaching vacancy is it's upon us.
Well, and the next storyline to come with this, if this play continues, and I think it can get really bad, is they had Josh McDaniels there for a decade, and he seemed to be the heir apparent, the coach in waiting, and now Bill O'Brien's back, and Robert Kraft, he wants to get back in the postseason and win. He said that this offseason, we haven't heard him speak on the team since. Coming up, we dive back into college football next.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Welcome into OutKick, the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in the land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number one overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
There's no doubt in my mind he could have caught the ball in his back pocket if he'd been running. Blowing a lead and losing a game is 100 times more lasting and painful in some clubhouses than losing the game 15-0. If I had to start a list in the last 10 years of horrible underachievers, he's at the top.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting. That was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only one or two. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Bold taste of a Southern legend.
Just like that, the second hour is here. Tuesday edition, Hot Mic with Honey Withrow across the OutKick Network. Withrow back with us tomorrow here on the OutKick Network. Glad you're with us today, streaming on YouTube, live on Twitter, and OutKick.com is also where you can find us, and on this great radio partner. Coming up in 20 minutes, NFL discussion with John McClain. Right now, we kick off the hour talking all things college football at the very top with former Nittany Lion, Penn State quarterback Christian Hackenberg joins us. Good to see you, man. Hope things are well.
Yeah, Jonathan, appreciate you having me back on again, man.
Yeah, man. How's the podcast going?
It's going well. It's going really well. Building, you know how that is.
Yeah, man.
But we're excited about it.
Yeah, and hopefully as well as the Penn State season so far. But I've been, over the last week or so, pondering, like, how things are shaking up at the top of college football. It's been crazy. It's been a blast of a season.
Yeah.
Where does Penn State stack up to you right now in the Big Ten? It seems wide open. Is it?
Yeah, I think I've covered this. This is the deepest team James Franklin's had up there. I think it's the most ready team to make the argument with, at the end of the day, Ohio State was the standard for a really, really long time. Michigan now has done a great job of disrupting that, and I give them a ton of credit. But when you're looking at both of those teams and the way that Penn State's roster is built, it's the closest it's been to that level. Again, from a depth standpoint, production standpoint. So for me, it's not so much a matter of looking at the paper and do they belong. They definitely belong there. Now it's about, can you go out and continually do that against those teams, and can you go out and beat those guys and be competitive? And we've had flashes, we've had periods of time, but the consistent competitiveness there has been void. So this year, I think, is a great opportunity for them to start stacking in the right direction. I thought they were going to capitalize on it after the Big Ten championship in 16, but
yeah,
I'm really excited. There's a lot to be excited about with this team, and I think it's got a good combination of youth and experience, and I think they're ready to compete. I think Michigan's more of a problem than Ohio State is right now, just looking at how they've played. And the schedule works out pretty well as opposed to previous years where we have some gaps between those two games. And, this bye week I think was big because if I'm a betting man, they definitely spent some time on Ohio State.
It's just those three teams, right? Is that how you stack it?
I mean, that's really how I stack it. I think that there's a gap right now. I got a lot of respect for Fickle out of Wisconsin. I think that's a program that can do it. But, I mean, realistically speaking, the Big Ten's been East heavy, and it's been those three teams. And to your point, Penn State's kind of been just the spoiler. Can they get one? Can they steal one? Can they catch a momentum wave here and there? And I think this year it's different. So hopefully it's a thing. It's a constant theme here heading towards the next 4, 5, 6 years.
And speaking of Michigan, so Michigan looks really, really good. You'll know better than me, like how much better do they look than a year ago? And the schedule, to me, I don't know how to figure them out yet. I know they're really good. If I'm debating on who's the top team in the country, like I'm looking at who they've played, and while I know they're in the conversation, I'm not putting them there yet. But I know they can be. Are they that much better than a year ago?
Well, I think the biggest thing is JJ's comfortable. And when you're watching JJ play, he's just so efficient. He had a couple turnovers last week and the week before, or maybe the week before. But he's been super, super efficient. He's been putting them in positions to win games, and they're still as physical as ever up front on both sides of the ball. And at the end of the day, I think when you look at the DNA of the teams that are the top teams in college football, they are extremely physical at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And they have a very deep, talented roster. And Michigan has both of those things. And to your point, they haven't played anybody yet, but
they've dominated though.
They have. And you can't take that away. There's always that double-edged sword. People are like, oh, you haven't played anybody, but you beat everybody by 20 points. Or you're in some dog fights, and it's at the end of the day, man, you got to let the best guys shake it out. And that's why I've been such a big proponent of the expansion. And to your point, you're looking at 10, 15 teams here that can be really, really competitive if you go into that model. I think it's going to be good for college football.
So how do you stack the top of college football right now? We've got a ways to go here. A lot of uncertainty. Yeah. Who are your top teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have it right now. I think
Okay.
some of the guys that are kind of hanging down in I guess the bottom half, below 5. I like the Washington team. I think the Pac-12 is really, really interesting.
I think
with
Washington could beat anybody.
Yeah, Michael Penix Jr. is an X factor. But I think that's a really, really good football team. Oregon's awesome, and looking at even watching the Red River rivalry. I mean, Texas has looked phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I love Quinn Ewers, and I think that their defensive line is. I know, you can say they show up, whatever, but I think the roster is built to be able to compete. So, and that game shook out the way it did, but it's just the dispersion of talent in college football now is such a thing with the transfer portal and unrestricted free agency. You can go out and get guys, you can flip rosters, you can be competitive in a year. And it's just, you really got to get excited about an expanded playoff, in my opinion, because then you're going to really find out. Take the elements of running with confidence and getting on a hot streak and being able to play well throughout the end of the year.
Man, and then, also the first round home games.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Like the atmosphere with it too. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. All of a sudden, Christian Hackenberg, our guest, all of a sudden we've got Alabama and Georgia staring down Atlanta again. Wasn't that long ago we're trying to search for the next quarterback at Alabama if Milroe wasn't the guy, right? But
yeah.
Milroe's looked good the last 2 weeks. I'm not buying, though, that they're not going to lose again. Are you buying that it's just Georgia and Bama?
I am not. I'm kind of on the same track as you. I think this Bama team's vulnerable. I don't think they're as dominant on the offensive line as they have been. They still have athletes, but it just feels different, man. I mean, from my opinion, I don't know about you, but for me, it just
a lot of mistakes.
Just feels different watching them. I hate to say it, but it's like the fall of an empire. Like it hit its peak, and now it's kind of like this. And I don't think Saban's going to let that happen. I think they're still going to be competitive. I'm not being extreme there, but it just feels different watching.
Yeah, 2 losses is the fall, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's the fall.
Yeah.
But man, it like I said, it just feels different watching them. It's not as crisp. It's not as detailed, and it's a far cry from the early 2010 Bama teams.
Yeah, and even like the last 5-6 years. I mean, they've always had the quarterback, Bryce Young, for instance. They had these mistakes a year ago, but Bryce Young would bail them out. And they still lost 2 games, but those losses could have been way worse based on 14 penalties and drop passes and, different things that were going on, illegal substitutions, bizarre things that have become a trend. I'm with you. It's not New England bad. It's not the Patriots' fault.
No.
Meanwhile, Georgia, was this past weekend this is the real team? Georgia showed us the real Bulldogs group now, and that's what we have moving forward? Or am I giving Kentucky too much credit in that 51-13 beatdown?
No, I don't think you are. I think Kentucky's a good team, and I think Stoops has done a great job of developing identity down there, and they've been a problem. And the way they beat Florida, I thought that was pretty good. And I was excited to see what type of Georgia team would show up. There's been a lot of turnover because coordinators, the defense, and the defense is built differently than it was the previous 2 years. I mean, I went out on live mic saying that was probably arguably some of the best defensive football ever played in college football the past few years with Georgia. And, you're not going to be able to do that year in, year out. You're just not. So being able to win different, being tested, I think is good. But I still think that this Georgia team and the way Kirby runs the ship is poised. And they're kind of on the beginning. They're on the upslope in terms of where I think that program can be for the next 5 to 10 years.
Christian Hackenberg with us on Hot Mic with Hutton Withrow. You mentioned Washington right there at the top. You were like, I do too. And we both agree they can beat anyone. Oregon can do the same thing. What do you make of the matchup this coming weekend and the outlook for the Pac-12 in the final year as we know it for that conference?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be fun, man. I'm excited about watching it. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored there, maybe. But
I hope so.
Yeah. I think, but I think really those are the two. I'm looking at USC even too now, and I think they have a lot of the same problems. It's the brunt of the weight and the onus on winning the football game is solely on Caleb Williams' shoulders. The defense has not gotten any better. They've been in dogfights So as good as Caleb is, I don't think that he's going to be able to go out and beat an Oregon and a Washington and even a UCLA. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to go out and continue to do that. And I think this week's going to be a tough challenge for him against Notre Dame. So, you know, I'm excited to see the shakeout. I think it's been good for the Pac-12. Obviously, there's a lot of changes going on there, but they've put together good ball for the past few years, and both of these programs in Oregon and Washington are really fun to watch.
How does your Heisman stack up right now?
It's just so all over. Again, it's so all over the place. I think it's so early. You haven't really had that like Heisman moment from anybody. There's been a lot of really good football played, especially at the quarterback position. I think Caleb, when you're looking at him, again, if you're talking about if you took Caleb Williams off that football team, I don't know if they're even close to the position they're in.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And his numbers are great. Again, like my beef with the whole Heisman thing is, we see snapshots, and I bring the question up because we'll see a snapshot this weekend in this Washington-Oregon matchup. Yeah. The voters, I don't think, watch a whole lot of college football unless it's in their region, and it's mainly the East Coast. But this is the showdown for Penix Jr. or for Bo Nix, for that matter, to put on a show and garner some attention because, I mean, the loser probably isn't featured as much in the national spotlight. The winner moves on for that. And that's how you gain the momentum in November and December.
Yeah, and it's the Heisman. I think it's funny. I talked to Yogi Roth about it a lot when I was on with him, and it's such the voting's a little construed, and I think it's just tough to define it now, and it's become like driven by quarterback play and so on and so forth. And I think there's a lot of really good players out there. I think Shador's carrying that Colorado team. He's having a hell of a year. So there's so many things that go into it, but I truly do think that award is won in that latter half of the season. There's guys that can make a name for themselves and carry it on, but you got to have those moments. I think, to your point, with this Washington and Oregon game for both Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., it's a great platform. And whomever comes out of that is going to have a chance to be in New York at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, and then like last year it was supposed to be C.J. Stroud, right? It ends up being Caleb Williams. Hendon Hooker gets hurt towards the end of the year, and it was almost by default that it went to Caleb Williams. That's not knocking him. He had a great season, but it almost went to him by default. I wonder, though, because of all the quarterback play and kind of the craziness where I think we're going to have several quote-unquote upsets that maybe not really upsets this season. If we see a skill position player, kind of like we saw with Devontae Smith the year that he won it, maybe a Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers is starting to get some attention in Georgia. I wonder if they can sneak through and then join the discussion.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s that kid is leaps. I mean, I can't even say enough about watching him. It's crazy. The NFL scouts are drilling over him. He's insane. Just the matchup, the problems. You got teams clouding him. He's still catching the football, and he's going to be as long as he stays healthy, he is going to be a really, really good player. Almost, I'd say a generational talent.
And then Bowers too. Bowers is being discussed as coming out as a freshman if he could. He couldn't.
Swiss Army knife.
Legit.
He's the true definition of a tight end because you can keep him on the field in multiple personnels. He blocks really well. He's physical. He's fast. He's a mismatch, and he plays the position for what it is. He's not just out there catching footballs and as a big oversized receiver. They're using him in the run game. Like he's a problem.
Christian Hackenberg, our guest on Hot Mic with Hutton Withrow across the OutKick Network. You mentioned USC could face a problem with Notre Dame. Notre Dame coming off of the loss to Louisville. What do you like about the matchup for the Irish to give you some pause about USC? Or maybe it's just the Trojan defense.
Yeah, I think it's the Trojan defense. And I also think, that Notre Dame team was disappointing with that loss to Louisville. I thought after the Ohio State game, it was going to be a completely different, even though it didn't turn out the way that it wanted to. They did everything right to win that game up until the last minute and a half. I thought that Freeman was going to turn the corner with that. I thought they were going to possibly be able to go on a run and still stay in the national picture. But I think the Louisville game kind of put them out of that conversation. But with that being said, I still have a ton of respect for Sam Hartman. I think he's doing a really, really good job. I look for that offense to get a little bit more explosive, kind of back to what he can do and create. And I could see this being a shootout, and I love Al Golden. I think that defense will have something for Caleb that could possibly present some issues. And, turn the ball over here or there, short field here or there. I think it's going to come down to that in that type of game.
Yeah, and another night game atmosphere. Again, it's going to be fun, a fun college football weekend. Final thing on the way out, other than Penn State, and it won't have to be Big Ten here, who are you rooting for? What kind of craziness do you want to see?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've just been a fan of, and I've always said this, like the blue bloods of college football are kind of starting to come back. I mean, Miami had an epic fail, but like Miami being back a little bit and Texas now rolling, like I'm just rooting for that to be a standard moving forward. And again, it goes back to what I said about the transfer portal and all that stuff. Those programs have such good funding. Like I think that they're going to be in standing and be around, and you're going to start seeing a much more competitive college football, like not just 1 through 4 or 1 through 5, but 1 through 15. And I think that's only going to be good for the fans, good for the sport. And good for the overall product. So it's really the blue bloods just getting back and getting the right guys leading the ship and being super competitive again.
Christian Hackenberg has been our guest. Always great. You can follow him on social at @CHackenberg1. Christian, great to catch up with you, man. And let's do this again down the road soon.
Appreciate you, brother. You know,
man.
I'm happy to jump on. So
appreciate it, man. Yeah, absolutely. Christian Hackenberg there. Great guy, and great analysis too. If you get a chance to check him out on some of the podcasts he's been a part of and the ones moving forward, do that. And here's hoping Penn State's a part of the conversation. I hope so. This is the year to climb the ladder, be more than just a spoiler, which I think that's a false narrative right now, and that's across a lot of college football. NFL discussion when we return. John McClain hops in the mix with us next here on Hot Mic.
The idea that we believe all women is total nonsense. As I told you, my sister, a 25-year prosecutor, made that very clear to not only me, but certainly her son, my son, and my nephew Pete. They're all the same age, these boys. But she also warned him of women like this cretin here, this gold diggings clown that decided I'm going to get my hooks into a big league ball player. I mean, look, big league ball players are dumb sometimes, but everybody's dumb sometimes. And Trevor Bauer, a guy named John Heyman, wrote an article which was titled, "Bauer Has Lost His Career and Deservedly So." You'll never hear John Heyman, who by all accounts is a famous baseball writer, apologize. You will never hear any of these fools apologize because our print media is the worst. Now, we're lucky here at OutKick that we have great people. But the national print media, the dudes that are out there, the Greg Doyles of the world, the John Heymans of the world, the Dana Bembaus of the world, this Molly Knight, who reported that this woman had a fractured skull. That's right. This idiot Molly Knight works for The Atlantic, and she got fired, excuse me, I guess, I don't know. Molly Knight is her name, not Wright, Knight. She, honest to God, wrote that this girl got her skull fractured. I looked up Molly Knight. Molly Knight is now basically unemployed, and of course, her Twitter is protected. Of course it is. This lady, Molly Knight, is a ridiculous fraud for printing that. It's all in The Athletic. It's in the affidavit. This woman, of course, went cowardly like all writers do when they're wrong. Ain't nothing wrong with John Heyman or Molly Knight coming out and saying, hey, what can I tell you? I got it wrong. But they can't do it. They can't do it because they're little posses that get a little bit of power and they don't know how to handle it. John Heyman is a little scrawny guy like Doyle that got a little bit of suck as they've gotten older, a little bit. And like politicians, they don't know how to handle it. They're the worst of the absolute worst. I got a guy from Iowa telling me, no, there's some really good writers. Yeah, Armando is. Yeah, the guys that write here are. But we're not bound by the same stupidity of USA Today. We're not governed. You can write freely here and you can write the truth. without fear of retribution as long as it's the truth. Can't do that in mainstream media, or they won't do that in mainstream media. There's got to be a bias. There's got to be an angle. There's got to be a push. If you're a woman, there's got to be a push. If you're black, got to be a push. If you're white, got to be a push. Got to be some kind of bias. I learned the other day, this was pretty funny. I know that if you do not agree with the liberal side, you will be called a name. I got a family member that calls me far right. I'm like, really? I don't even know what that means, but I get it. You're a liberal, so I'm far right. You got to call me a name. The world is insane. Good for Trevor Bauer. Cubs, sign Trevor Bauer. I'll wear a damn Trevor Bauer jersey. And you can kiss my backside on any of them. Any of them.
Fast-paced show. Hot Mic with Under with Row rolls on across the OutKick network. 6th and Peabody, our location with EHOP Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Great catching up with Christian Hackenberg. Always great to talk NFL with John McClain. SportsRadio610.com is where you can find him. You can also find him right now. He's joining us as he watches his Astros. John, how are you?
I'm doing great. Astros leading the Twins 4-0. After the top of the first.
That's not bad. Things are always great for Mattress Mac and John McClain. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, Mattress Mac getting so much attention.
I know.
He was supposed to throw out the first pitch in the first game, and they pulled him at the last minute. And the Astros were infuriated that Mattress Firm, which is a national company based here, has a relationship with MLB. So baseball powers that be told the Astros to pull him. So he got benched. He immediately did a video that went viral. He was on the front of Bleacher Report, Yahoo. He was all over the Chronicle, and he got more publicity out of that because if you'd thrown out the first pitch, nobody would have seen it.
No.
Big Papi would have been talking. And now one of the biggest fans in Minnesota took out money for 45 billboards here about twins and mattresses. And so Mac now has retaliated with billboards in Minneapolis, and they're having a big time over it.
Isn't Mattress Firm, the conspiracy is that's how you launder money because they're so close to one another in like the state of Ohio?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I just know they're both based here and one's national. And poor little old Mattress Mac at Gallery Furniture, just a little old local company trying to make ends meet.
Yeah, not poor little old Mattress Mac.
With an owner that's going to win $46 million if the Astros win the World Series. Of course, last year he won $75 million.
John McClain with us. John, the NFL as we go into Week 6. Baltimore coming off of a loss where they should have taken care of business, all the drop passes. Of course, we hit with the storylines with New England and the storylines in Denver and what happened with the Jets this weekend. The Chiefs continue to win, but they don't look like the juggernaut right now. San Francisco is hands down the best team, the most complete team, and they have yet another complete victory on Sunday night.
Boy, I hated to see the Cowboys just get dismantled and all their fans be so devastated on Monday and all week. It's just terrible. But the fact is, 49ers are great.
They are.
They might have won the Super Bowl last year if they hadn't had all those injuries at quarterback. The best thing I saw wasn't the 49ers shellacking the Cowboys, which I did like, but was Sean Payton getting it stuck where the sun don't shine by Nathaniel Hackett and the Jets. I thought it was so classless for Payton to say what he said about Nathaniel Hackett, one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL. Now you're seeing one of the worst coaching jobs in the NFL, and it ain't Hackett, it's Sean Payton. So you know what they say about karma, and it wouldn't bother me in the least, Jonathan, if he didn't continue to get humiliated.
Well, and the way that played out, because Hackett at the time, whenever those comments were made or when they came out through USA Today, he admitted, he was like, because it was, 2 weeks into the training camp or something. Maybe it was right as it was starting. And he admitted, he was like, man, I thought I would get a lot of this in week 5. I'm surprised it happened now. But he handled it the right way. He had the backing of Aaron Rodgers and Saleh and others. And then to have it reverse back on Peyton, John, from that moment to week 5, and not to do it with Aaron Rodgers, but to do it with Zach Wilson, that's a storyline that goes from nightmare to dream for him.
What I liked about it, Robert Saleh made him an honorary captain on Friday. And then I've never seen an assistant coach getting so many hugs before a game was over. And they had it locked up after a return for a touchdown to make it 31-21. So on the sideline, probably about a minute 30 left. Players are hugging him. Everybody's hugging Hackett. And then after the game, Robert Saleh gave him the only game ball. And it's obvious the players like him. You know, he wasn't a good head coach. He was a terrible head coach. Sean Payton was a great head coach when he had a Hall of Fame quarterback. Now, at least at this point of the season, he's being exposed, and he can't blame it on Russell Wilson. He hadn't been bad. He's been better than he was last year, but, man, Peyton's got egg on his face. He was asked afterward if he regretted saying that. He should just come out and say, of course I regret it. I wish I hadn't done it. Instead, he said, already answered.
Yeah, exactly. Of course he regrets it because it's been the storyline to pair with an even worse storyline of his season. John, starting over, that is what Bill Belichick says about where the Patriots are. Starting over where and with who is my follow-up to that. 34-0, the final score to New Orleans in Foxborough this past weekend. 72-3, the final score in consecutive weeks. Mac Jones benched in consecutive weeks, and we're seeing things we've never seen from Belichick in New England. We knew it was going to be a process whenever they lost Brady. It's way more than that. They are among, just roster-wise, looking ahead to what they have in the offseason and the rebuild and all this, among the worst spots in the AFC. And they're not just among the worst in their division. They're looking at like a top 5 pick right now.
Which would be really good for them
that
and
would
the
be.
fans if they got it. It's a good thing brought back Bill O'Brien to resurrect Mac Jones's career in that offense, because no telling how bad they would be if he hadn't done that. I loved it this week when he said we're going to start over. And somebody said, well, what does exactly start over mean? And he goes, start over.
There are
and
some.
He said that several times. Start over. Well,
some really good reporters, John. Really good reporters, John. Tom Curran, Mike Reese, who even in the preseason said, yeah, the seat's hotter than you may expect, because Robert Kraft has already mentioned, hey, we haven't won a playoff game since Brady's been here. We need to be the postseason. And we haven't heard from him about those comments or what has happened on the field. I'm intrigued about that in regards to starting over.
It's being pointed out how many coaches and executives like Nick Caserio, Scott Pioli, a lot of guys that had a lot to do with Belichick having the final say, of course. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of good people have left that organization for other jobs. And people are saying, well, it's pretty obvious since he has a losing record without Brady and another guy's being exposed. Well, Josh McDaniels was a great offensive coordinator when he had Tom Brady, and he isn't an offensive coordinator or head coach without Brady. So I don't know what they do. I was told by people back as far back as the Combine, Kraft wasn't happy, and he wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't Belichick's last year. And I know I wouldn't want to go in there as the next coach, or as they say, well, hire a personnel guy to help you make decisions. No, Belichick's had total control of that organization since 2001, his second season. And they're in a hole at Bill's age. I think he's 72. If he's not, he's going to be soon. And I don't know that they've got the talent, or if Kraft has the patience to see if he can turn it around. But it's pretty obvious. Nothing's worked with Mac Jones. He's gone backward since an impressive rookie year. Don't know if they got the answers. Maybe another team will be, but they've got to get a new quarterback.
Yep. John McClain with us. You can follow him on social at McClain_on_NFL. Belichick 71, John. You're right. He will be 72 in April. 72 in April, maybe on a new team. Do you think we'll get to that later. There's plenty of time to discuss what the future of Bill Belichick. Do you think the Minnesota Vikings are about to have a fire sale at the trade deadline? They're 1-4. Justin Jefferson just went to injured reserve, and Kirk Cousins isn't coming back after this year. What do you do if you're Minnesota? Because their upcoming games, they have Chicago, then they have San Francisco and Green Bay before October 31st deadline.
Well, anybody can beat Green Bay if Love plays like he did on Monday night. He was terrible. And they expect him to get better, of course, because he's starting for the first time. The Bears, Justin Fields, for the last 6-7 quarters, has looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And the Bears not going to end up with a first pick. That could be Carolina. Carolina might be able to restore some of that draft capital if they trade position where somebody can get Caleb Williams or Drake May. That ought to be worth a lot of picks like they gave up to get Bryce Young. But right now, Minnesota, we're assuming they're not going to spend a lot of money to bring back Kirk Cousins at his age. They might as well do it. The team loses its quarterback, but trade him now and get what they can get and then hope they're bad enough to get one of these quarterbacks. The problem, Jonathan, there's so many teams that need quarterbacks, and it's a great draft for quarterbacks, including a deep draft for quarterbacks. But man, there's only two they say are can't miss: Williams and May. So you better be in position to get them. And if you were somebody like Carolina and you've got multiple teams trying to get that pick, telling what kind of draft haul you can get after you gave so much to get up to get Bryce Young.
We're seeing a lot of maneuvering in the month of October. That's traditionally where you see the cream rise to the top. And as we're sitting here going into the second week of October, I bring it up because it seems like, John, all of a sudden, the Bengals getting healthier. Burrow says all the right things about his health. We'll see about the mobility. The Chargers didn't have a great start, but 7 teams now get into the postseason, not 6. Chargers and Bengals, we haven't mentioned them a lot through the first month of the season. I suspect we're about to in October.
Well, I don't pay any attention to September and October because in my 47 years now covering the NFL, they always say it's not what you do in September and October, but November and December, now January, since they play into January. There are always players who start slow and pick it up, players who start fast and peter out, and the same with teams. So a hot team right now that people are excited over, better pump the brakes. You want to see it sustained. Now, Burrow and the Bengals got too much talent not to at least compete for that division, which has been a huge disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Pittsburgh and Cleveland were capable of winning the division. I watched the Texans just stomp the Steelers after they were coming off back-to-back victories. Now the Steelers turn around and beat the Ravens, although the Ravens just gift-wrapped it
They
for
did.
them. And that division's been a big disappointment to me. There's really in the NFC, and I'm not putting Dallas anymore, watching them lose to Arizona and then just get obliterated by the 49ers. It's San Francisco and Philadelphia in the NFC. Nobody from the South, nobody from the North, and I don't see any team other than the 49ers in the West. Everybody's bunched behind them. And then if you look at the AFC, I think right now, I thought Buffalo this time last week, and then they get beat by Jacksonville, who I saw get wiped out by the Texans in Jacksonville. So I think the Chiefs, and they're not great, but they're still the best team, and you think they'll get better over time. But to me, there's one great team, but Philadelphia and Kansas City close behind, and maybe, just maybe, Detroit can sustain what they started building on last year because they're fun to watch and they're 4-1.
Yeah, they can. They're getting stops on defense. They can run the football. They're making the right calls with the quarterback. Goff is keeping, maybe more importantly, he's spinning it, but he's keeping them out of the wrong play more times than not. And they have a Coach of the Year candidate right now going into the second quarter of the season. And I think Detroit's legit. Miami, Buffalo is very hit or miss. I'm with you. It's wide open, and it's for as stacked as the AFC is or was. The quarterback injuries at the top, Burrow to start the season, then of course Rodgers out with the Jets has opened up the door for some slow starts. With the case of a strong finish, it's going to be fun, John.
We all thought the AFC was superior, and it may end up being superior, but the two best teams right now are in the NFC. 49ers last year, they started to build something special with Brock Purdy. Right now, he should be the leading candidate to be the MVP. And we shouldn't be talking about him being Mr. Irrelevant anymore. He is a great young quarterback, and they're taking advantage of not having to pay him much by bringing in talent around him. And that was on full display against the Cowboys. Poor old Cowboys.
John, you always bring it, even on game days for your Astros, who are up 4-0 in the second. Get back to it. We always enjoy this and enjoy Week 6 across the NFL.
Jonathan, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much, as always.
Yep, there's John McClain, the great John McClain. SportsRadio610.com is where you can check out the podcasts with him and read his great work. Joins us weekly here on Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow. Coming up, NFL overreactions. We hit the AFC yesterday. Davey joins me when we come back, and we'll dive into the NFC. And New Orleans, shellacking New England. The Saints have to be in this list of overreactions, don't they? We'll discuss them and much more next on Hot Mic.
I'm here at the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, but that's not the only big race that's on people's minds. Let's go talk about it.
There's no way Biden can win again. There's just no way. Even the people that voted for him because they didn't like Trump, now at least have to see, like, senile, not all there, probably won't be alive for 4 more years.
Are you a Trump guy? Or are you a DeSantis guy? Or someone else?
I don't like any of them.
Who's your dream candidate? Who would you want to run?
Myself. I think the best candidates probably are smart enough not to run.
I just hope there's somebody that's young enough to care about the country instead of their politics.
My fear is they get Gavin Newsom from California, and I think it would be the new cool vote for the younger people, and that's what I don't like.
Who do you think on the Republican side would be able to take on Gavin Newsom?
Great question. As a Republican registered, I love what Trump's body of work did, but they're just out to get him and destroy him, and we won't get things done, which is crappy for me to say. I thought DeSantis was going to be the guy. Trump only has 4 years left. He cannot fix everything that just happened in 4 years. And he's going to be battling indictments and all these false stuff for the next 4 years. We won't get anything done. And it'll just be this stalemate in America. That's why I almost don't want him in. But if he is the leading candidate, that's who I'm going to vote for.
Is there any Democrat that you would vote for, consider voting for?
Absolutely not.
What about RFK Jr.?
No.
Who should our first female president be?
Michelle Obama, of course. Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to go with Harambe 2024.
We have the 2024 presidential race coming up, and I wanted to see who you thought your favorite TV characters would vote for. Homer Simpson, like who do you think he would vote for?
Donald Trump, all the way.
Vito Corleone.
Whoa. Whoever advances the cause of the Corleone family. Yeah.
Tony Soprano. If Tony Soprano is voting in the 2024 election, who do you think he's voting for?
I'm going to go Ron DeSantis.
Okay, why do you think that?
Just seems like a Ron DeSantis kind of guy.
Is this a meatball joke that you're trying to make right now? What about Homer Simpson?
Homer would vote for Biden because he's a dope.
Who do you think Napoleon Dynamite would vote for?
That's a good question. I actually don't know.
There's a right answer here.
He's voting for himself or Pedro. There's a Viking show, I think.
Okay.
Maybe that's Hulu. I don't know.
So in the Vikings show, whatever the main character is, who do you think they would vote for in 2024?
Probably a A goat or a dog?
I think we have one of those in office right now. So who do you think Jon Snow would vote for in this upcoming election?
I'm going to say Donald J. Trump.
Why do you think so?
Because Game of Thrones is all about drama, and Trump comes with the drama, baby.
Would you vote for Trump from jail?
Yeah, probably. Because at that point, what else do you have to lose?
Okay, would you vote for Trump from a jail cell?
Yeah, baby, I will get Trump out of jail.
Would you vote for Trump in jail?
Oh, yeah.
Based as
The thing that Trump needs to remember is there's another political figure that said, I don't recall very well.
Yeah.
And that's all he's got to say.
Is there like a dream candidate, someone that you think could like save us all?
Yeah, Jesus.
Amen to that.
Our thanks to the great guests today on the show, Trey Wallace, Christian Hackenberg, and John McClain for joining us. Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick network. Coming up in about 40 minutes from right now, Jim Nagy will join us. He's the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. We'll get his take on the top scouting evaluations for the college football season going into the NFL draft and the impact players. And really, this is the time of year where he's actually sending out, he and his 18, some odd 20, 25 scouts for the Senior Bowl. They're going around to some top games now because conference play is really heated up. And we'll get his take on the Heisman race and much more. Plus, Davey, whenever he joins us, I'm going to get into the discussion or the critical, the media criticism continues for Brock Purdy, and it's like it's not like, oh, he sucks at this, he's really bad. It's just a slight, just a very minuscule slight every time Purdy is brought up in the discussion. I'm tired of it. I'm going to see if he agrees with me, because Purdy at 10-0 now as the starter in the regular season speaks for itself. And McClain mentioned it in the last segment. I didn't know he was going to mention the MVP race as Purdy being the favorite, but he's got Brock Purdy as the most valuable player in the NFL currently. I don't know if I would go that far yet, but it's closer to that than it is Brock Purdy is a feature within a great system. Because if that's the case, if it were that easy to just pluck and play, I present to you Trey Lance.
That's fair. I can't go down the road of him being
I present
MVP.
To you Sam Darnold.
Again, he's doing a great job. The 10-0 record speaks for itself, but it's like I usually play that game of the MVP. Not saying it's plug and place, but it's, all right, let's take some of these guys off other rosters, move them in there. Can I still see them being an above average to an elite player in those systems? And right now, I don't think, if you were to say, let's take, I think based off the numbers, I can double check, but I'm pretty sure Tua and Patrick Mahomes are the leading candidates in the clubhouse to win MVP right now.
Yep.
I don't think if you were to put Brock Purdy on the Chiefs, he's doing what he's doing.
Sure.
I don't think I could argue just based off the speed alone for the Dolphins, he might be able to put up some really good stats with that Dolphins offense. But again, that's when it comes back to, just having those coaches in place. Mike McDaniel comes from the Kyle Shanahan tree. And what they're able to do where they did strike out on Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, I get. But it's not okay, it's easy to find this guy, let's go. It's just, can you have that guy that's making those quick reads, understands the offense, and clearly he does get that.
Yeah, but just making the counter to this just early with the Mahomes. Mahomes is the MVP. He's the guy. There's only a very 2 or 3, 4 quarterbacks like that where you can move around and they can make a bad team good or a good team great.
Well, and I mean, I can't.
But Brock Purdy hasn't been outplayed by Zach Wilson this season. Patrick Mahomes was.
I will say I made that comparison yesterday from Purdy to early days of Tom Brady in in New England. I don't think Tom Brady deserved an MVP his first 10 years in New England.
Well, the MVP though, like it's a quarterback type driven. It is. It's the vote. But Purdy's going to, as long as they keep winning, it hurts as well because I think he'll pick up. The Eagles are not playing their best and they continue to win. That's in part due to what we're seeing from Jalen Hurts. That will pick up. And then the other quarterback that I think will start to pick up some traction as long as they keep winning, and they're in a division where they should, is Jared Goff, believe it or not. They're going to get more and more attention in Detroit. That will be the next media concocted storyline is can Jared Goff win MVP this season? Going through some of the other NFL headlines today, James Conner placed on injured reserve. He's headed to IR. Justin Jefferson is the big storyline from earlier, hamstring injury. He's on IR with a chance to return. So maybe some big fantasy football reactions for those on the waiver wire this week.
It's waiver day.
It is. Pete Carroll has defended Jamal Adams and the sideline outburst where he was not disciplined by the NFL. And, in fact, he did have a concussion. For those who maybe missed it or unfamiliar, Adams went after the independent neurologist on the sideline, the doctor that is there specifically for head injuries, and was taking him out of the game after he took a knee to the helmet. And Adams explained in his apology about all this that he just wasn't in the right headspace because he wasn't himself. He had a concussion. I said at the time, and I will continue to say, this happens more often than you would think. And it happened a lot more often, in the past where there wasn't a protocol in place, including last year. Until around this time last year, the protocol was you could be evaluated, you could be cited from the top of one of the independent evaluators in the booth, in the box. They could call down, you'd be pulled over to the sideline, you go into the blue tent. Normally that's where the argument happens, is in the blue tent or in the locker room. And then you come back out after stating your case, and you're good. You just either had a stinger or you had the cobwebs or knocked out a bit. You know, you're fuzzy, but you're not concussed. There are ways through let's go through the alphabet backwards, or let's go through certain questions that we asked you in the preseason that are this concussion test now to see if you have the answers. Guys would memorize certain answers, and if you're still pissed off about it, that's when the argument ensued. This policy worked where you're out, we've cited you as having a head injury or you're unstable. You're not going back in the game regardless of what argument you're going to make, regardless of how heated you are. And I said last week, and I maintain, the NFL should be happy with this result because it was public, it's on display. You see Jamal Adams, one of the top players at his position in the league, making a case to go back in the game after suffering a concussion. And guess what? The policy didn't allow him to do it, even if he was making a great case for himself. End of story. The NFL actually should point to this as, this is where we got it right. Jamal Adams is doing something that every player, for the most part, has done, especially those that have come and gone that are suffering from brain issues right now. They lobby to go back in the game. And at least more and more players are either, number one, they are citing concussion issues or symptoms on their own, which is up. More and more players are doing that on their own now. That is a good thing. And now there's a policy in place to where whatever happens on the sideline, whatever star player is upset about the independent doctor, it does not matter. There's no blue tent to go and hide and then come out with some smelling sauce and say, oh, it was just a stinger for the shoulder. I'm totally fine with him saying he wasn't himself. I get that type of reaction because that type of reaction happens a lot across the National Football League, and they're trying to tamp down on it.
I would also add to this, and this is like what I initially thought of whenever I saw this interaction take place with Adams was he only played 15 snaps in 2022. So he had been out an entire year just trying to get back on the gridiron. And then 9 plays into his first start in 2023, he has the concussion. So I see all that frustration boiling up. And obviously it came to the point where we actually saw that. I don't want to necessarily call it an altercation, but the argument ensued.
Well, yeah, he's heated, but he did have a concussion. He was in concussion protocol. Seattle had a week off, so he's going to play this coming week. He'll clear concussion protocol most likely for the Cincinnati matchup on Sunday. But yeah, I mean, I think that's.
I'm saying it's an added element to the story as far as why I see him actually going off, even if it is. Just simply like if that wasn't a part of it and he still gets frustrated because of the concussion, like I get that. But I'm just saying like, man, it's been a year off. This guy's just trying to battle back from injury where he's last several years, it's not gone well for him on that front. And then he's finally out there. Yeah. And then this is something where he still feels I'm not injured. I can go back out there and play.
Yeah. And a lot of guys feel that way. A lot of guys now, I'm starting to notice, and I was on the sideline. I'm not down there hearing the conversations anymore. But you'll see it on the TV broadcast now. Guys will get knocked down, and they'll start pointing at their shoulder if they're slow to get up. They'll start holding their shoulder on purpose because they're trying not to get flagged from down. Because the eye in the sky is only looking for wobbly, unstable players who had a hit to the head. In this case, he did. He took a knee to the helmet and then went straight into concussion protocol. Davey, our protocol each and every week for the NFL is overreaction. We hit the AFC yesterday. Let's go NFC today. And where are we starting?
So for this edition of NFL Overreaction, we're going down to the NFC South. And right now, Hutton, the New Orleans Saints are going to win that division.
Yeah, I think so. I think they are. Their defense is good. They dominated New England. They dominated the Titans in week 1. And while the storyline from week 5 is, well, we're seeing New England hit rock bottom, the Saints offense is starting to pick things up after showing some duds. They have the talent on offense. They certainly have the quarterback that can be consistent. And their quarterback, who has an injured shoulder, looked better this week. Alvin Kamara is back. He's, nearly 100 yards from scrimmage. That's a team that's going to win the South, even though I think it will be a division that's going to look a little battered and bruised because I do think you'll see Atlanta get a game or two. Same for Tampa.
I guess if you had to put money on who finishes second, where are you going there?
Probably Tampa. And I say that only because I'm trying to think of the head-to-head matchups. Tampa's already won in New Orleans. So
decisively.
Yes. So the Bucs to me are number 2, but I think I just think the strength of the roster will show itself for New Orleans as the season progresses.
Okay. Well, speaking of Tampa, they actually go on the road to take on the Lions this week, and that leads me to my next conversation piece, which is Dan Campbell is the NFL Coach of the Year. Right now, I think so. It's either him or Nathaniel Hackett with all the discussion. Yeah, I mean, look, he has a team right now that has won 12 games in the last 15, and they've done it on the road as well this year at Arrowhead to begin, which is tough on that Thursday night. At Arrowhead, and then they went to Green Bay and won at Lambeau. Yeah, I think the Lions, they have right now the Coach of the Year in Dan Campbell because they were the talk of the offseason, and so far, again, 5 weeks in, they're backing it up. Might have misspoke. That game's actually going to be in Tampa, but sticking with the NFC North and the Lions, the NFC North will only have one team make the playoffs. Yes. I think we'll see Green Bay, while I think they're happy. I'm pleased with what I've seen from Jordan Love. I know last night the 3-interception performance, not good. It did not help me out at all. But Chad, I think Chad started him too. I can't get over the fact that they are so consistently bad with their offense and slow starts. They're constantly scoring 3 or 7 points in the first half. That's not going to spell a wild card berth for them come December. Yeah, and it's just, I mean, because I'm kind of having that debate with.
Plus, Aaron Jones continues to be an issue.
Yeah, can't get
injury-wise.
healthy. I just don't see the NFC South getting multiple teams in, but you would think just based off the situation of the NFC and with 3 wild card spots available, typically we've seen the NFC North get multiple teams in. But I'm kind of with you right now. I don't trust
think so.
the Packers.
It could mean Tampa could get a wild card spot.
I mean, at this point, it's trending that's more likely the option than any of these other NFC North teams because with Jefferson on IR, we know what the Chicago Bears are. They're not playoff contenders by any stretch of the imagination. You just can't trust Green Bay at the moment.
And, I mean, this is what the Commanders have had their chances, man. They just lost to Chicago. And the Commanders could be that third team out of the East. You know, you have 3 teams again that were playoff contenders. No, not if you're losing the Chicago Bears this year. Who do we have as contenders for the college football playoff? We'll weigh in on how we would update that right now across the college football slate. Next.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
There's no doubt in my mind he could have caught the ball in his back pocket if he'd been running. Blowing a lead and losing a game is 100 times more lasting and painful in some clubhouses than losing the game 15-0. If I had to start a list in the last 10 years of horrible underachievers, he's at the top.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting. That was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only 1 or 2. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Taste of the Southern legend.
Just like that, the final hour is here for this Tuesday edition of Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network. Glad you're streaming us live on YouTube. If you saw the one tweet we sent out with the link, thank you for finding us there on X. And, join us in the chat there. Chad's back tomorrow, and he'll join you in the chat live on YouTube. And you can find us live at OutKick.com, plus this great radio station. Props to the crew here in Nashville for flat out getting it done. 6 in the Peabody location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. We've got Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, coming up in about 20 minutes. He's got some big thoughts and opinions on the top players across the country. We'll see how the Heisman is shaping up for him halfway through the season now. And we'll even turn our attention a bit to the NFL. Craziness with the Patriots and where they're headed, which is nowhere, fast, maybe worse. Can it get worse? It absolutely could. 72-3, the final score of the last 2 games. And Mac Jones being benched 2 straight games now. What does he think based on having scouted him? Plus, he's worked within the Patriots organization as a scout in the past. We'll also get his take on Brock Purdy and much more. Mario Cristobal deserves the harsh criticism. If not the worst decision, one of the worst decisions we've ever seen as far as college football coaching. Not taking the knee on the football, and the game's over. You beat Georgia Tech. Instead, we know what happens. Ball's on the ground. They can't tackle. 2 plays later, touchdown, Georgia Tech pulls the upset over Miami. And once again, Cristobal hands those backing his team a bad beat. He did this in years past against Stanford, for instance. He does it again. No bad beats with PointsBet. If you haven't taken your shot with PointsBet, now's the perfect moment. Big reason, exclusively for the first-time PointsBet users. Grab this unique offer. PointsBet users get up to $1,000 in second-chance bets. If your first bet doesn't go as planned, PointsBet has your back with a second chance. Get this offer by visiting OutKick.com/bet. OutKick.com/bet. That's where you complete the registration process with PointsBet, and you make your first bet. If your first bet happens to lose, that's when your second chance bet comes into play. Remember, terms and conditions apply. You got to be 21 or older in legal gambling states. Gambling states listed at OutKick.com/bet. Gambling problem, 1-800-GAMBLER. Head over to OutKick.com/bet right now to grab this offer. Cristobal continues to own the mistake. But, I mean, this is one of the dumbest decisions, given the situation and given that you've been in that situation before. Clock management, knowing that the opponent doesn't have any timeouts, knowing that you can drain it, you take the knee and you get out of there with a victory. We see that happen with teams that just take the knee and go to the locker room at halftime so they don't turn the football over and give their opponent short field with a chance at a chip shot. In this case, short field, no. Just you stop Georgia Tech, tackle them. They couldn't do that. But the egg is on the face of Mario Cristobal. Apologize and own it all you want, and he's done that. He said, yeah, I should have just stepped in and said, yeah, take the knee. Too little, too late. And that's a decision, Davey, that I think haunts him now. That's one that the fan base, the boosters, the university, those covering, that's one you just don't escape, given situations like we saw on Saturday.
And you don't. And
it follows you.
Let's say they come out and they end up beating the 12th-ranked North Carolina Tar Heels this week. It's not going to matter because a one-loss ACC team's not making the college football playoff. So their schedule lightens up after this week a little bit in terms of what they have seen, but you're not coming back from that this year. And whenever it's moving to the 12-team playoff, you'll obviously have more opportunities, but with the last year for the 4-team, an undefeated ACC champion is likely in. And right now that looks as though it's going to be Florida State. And I don't think Miami could beat Florida State, but you would at least give yourself a chance.
Yeah, I know.
If you had won that game. And to just have it go in that fashion is terrible. And like players, or not players, but fans nowadays are more familiar with game styles, game scripts by growing up playing Madden, playing NCAA football. So they're sitting there on the couch, at least a lot of them, for like fans like me, diehard fans, realizing like what they are doing in that moment and you're a coach being paid millions and millions of dollars.
Millions.
And you have support staff, more support staff now than they've ever had in the history of college football, and not one person comes to you and says, hey, let's not do this. That's problematic. And that falls on more than just the head coach, in my opinion, at Miami.
Well, yeah, agreed. But he says, like, some of the comments this week. And look, he can't do anything but own it.
Yeah. I mean, that's at least a good first step.
I can't do anything but think not just the call, but the reaction on the bench from the Miami players, the Hurricanes players, and what they're thinking about. What just happened? What are we doing? And I said yesterday, like, if there are middle school students that know how to make a victory formation, and the fact that you train and you practice and you plan hours on end for the victory formation, and then you don't call the victory formation, that is a fireable offense with cause to me. If a head coach making that much money can't just take a knee and allow his team to get out of there with a victory.
I mean, this is on Mario. There's no other way around it. But I am curious as to, was there a player on the field that just said, wait a second, like, let's talk this over. Why are we doing this? Did anyone raise an alarm as far as we don't need to do this? You would think there's enough players out there with a football intelligence level to realize the situation.
No, this is not on them.
It's not on them, but like, I'm just curious. Like, I'm adding to that conversation of, did someone at least realize this, or is it just like it's a systemic problem from the top down and people aren't even thinking for themselves in Miami?
It was just a boneheaded mistake where the players run the play that's called in there, and in this case they literally ran it, and then Georgia Tech ran it in the end zone. On a bomb. It was just so stupid, and it follows you.
I'll play armchair quarterback, but if I'm in that situation, I like to think, I'd be like, wait a second, let's hold up here.
Streaming has already reached the NFL, right? You got Amazon; they're paying $1 billion for the Thursday Night Football rights. We're going to see this moving forward in the college football playoff, and I think, Davey, that's when we'll see Amazon, Apple, Warner Brothers Discovery is now in the mix now. The streaming aspect and the money coming in, that to me is what will dictate the separation of the power conference and the rest of college football. Do you agree?
I do. I still think as far as once this current rights deal ends for the college football playoff, ESPN, Fox will likely be the ones to walk away with the deal. But, I mean, I'm kind of curious to see if somebody can make that split happen.
But keep in mind, like, I think the networks have pretty much maxed out on the money they're going to pay. So if you're going to, and they're paying a lot, just ask the SEC or the Big Ten and ask Florida State what those programs are making. If you're maxed out, if you're going to get $100 million, you're not going to get much more from the networks. What's next? Well, Warner Brothers Discovery owns HBO Max. Max is, of course, where they're going to start debuting NBA games. They're going to start flirting with some playoff matchups as well through Turner. So I think that's the lane for the college football playoff. If they're going to bid on that, you're also going to get Max as well as the Turner networks.
Yeah, and I mean, with the NCAA tournament really being all they have at the moment, I mean, why not go in on something else?
Yeah.
That deal runs through 2032 for the NCAA tournament. So if you're looking to make a splash and definitely get into that,
and it took Turner getting in with CBS to keep ESPN's hands off of the tournament.
But it worked.
That's why they had to do it. You know, why is the Final Four on Turner? It's because they didn't want it on ESPN. CBS acquiesced, and they teamed together and made it happen.
Let's go. Let's get the 8:07 kickoff times for the college football playoff.
The official times, yes. We'll go the old school newspapers and Turner are where you can find the 8:07 kickoffs for the college football playoff. Speaking of college football playoff, let's roll through an update. We did this preseason. Let's roll through an update where we have certain programs right now, because it's tough because there are certain programs for me that I really like, but they haven't played the type of opponents that others have, and I don't want to be critical of this team didn't beat this other team by a certain amount of points, and, well, they actually scheduled a home-and-home with that team, unlike for instance, Michigan. But starting from 4 and let's go into number 1, Davey, and I'll start this off. Oklahoma just won over Texas. I still have the Longhorns getting in because I think the Longhorns are that talented, number 1. I'm a believer in Quinn Ewers putting it together. I'm a believer in that defensive front. I saw what happened against Alabama, and that win looks much better now than it did 2 weeks ago. And I think we'll have a rematch against Oklahoma for the Big 12 championship game. Not just the Big 12 championship, the championship games in general are going to carry more weight than they ever have before based on the landscape of this college football season. I think Texas wins that game. They're in the 4th spot in the final week.
It's not a bad pick. You at least know they're going to have that opportunity again. I think they went out in the Big 12, and they do get that chance against Oklahoma for a rematch. I'm going out west, Hut, and right now, we do this drill next week, we'll learn a lot because I'm going with the Oregon Ducks as my 4th team in the college football playoff. I look at the Pac-12, and while it is the best conference, I think Oregon's got the best defense of all these teams, and so that's why right now they get the lead. I mean, all these teams have veteran quarterbacks that have been able to make solid advancements towards their teams, and Bo Nix, he's been around, he understands it. Him and Dan Lanning, they lose to Washington this week. We could be having them flipped with the Huskies, but right now I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks at 4.
I had Oregon in my playoff to begin the season. I'm flipping it, though, because of what I've seen from Michael Penix Jr. Shout out Chad, who has Penix as his Heisman prediction, I believe, to begin the season. And that's where I would have it right now, too. It's a great showdown on Saturday. I think that there's a chance that we see a rematch here as well. But Washington, to me, can beat any team in college football. Oregon can as well, but I think it takes more convincing for me to buy in. So give me Washington and the Huskies at number 3 at overall for me.
I'm going to go to the Big Ten, and I'll just go ahead and say it. I only got one Big Ten team in the playoffs, and I'm going with Penn State. Michigan, they haven't played anybody. Ohio State, I just can't. I can't look at that schedule. I don't trust Kyle McCord enough to put them in this conversation to where they're going to ultimately come out on top.
Fair.
And so Penn State, what James Franklin's doing with that team right now, I think they have a incredible defense, and I think they're going to be able to do enough on offense to where they should be the 3 seed.
Number 2 for me, I've got one team in as well. I like Penn State. I'm rooting for Penn State. I said this earlier in the show. I'd love to see them in the 4-team playoff. Michigan's going to be in. Michigan, there's a debate right now, is Michigan the top team in the country? And they very well may be. But I can't put them number 1 just based on their schedule. They have dominated. They've done everything they should be doing. But I just need to see better competition for me to validate that opinion. I do know, based on what we've seen last year and what they have coming back and how they've started the season and how they have just shellacked opponents, they're basically the same group, if not better. They're the number 2 team. They should win the Big Ten. And if I'm headed over to PointsBet right now at outkick.com/bet, that's exactly where you would see my account slated. I've got the Wolverines winning. They're the number 2 seed.
Hut, going with my number 2, I've got the Oklahoma Sooners. I think OU, what they did to Texas, I mean, it has just been a night and day scenario for this team from last year to this year. They're playing at such a great level. They got their signature win, and right now, based off everything else that's happened in college football, I got them number 2.
Not bad. I mean, if Oklahoma continues to do what they've done, they're in that spot. I think they lose. That's why Texas is my 4. My number 1 is Georgia. I do think we saw the real Georgia stand up this past Saturday, and how it's hard for me to look at the offense and say that they're not going to be able to do what they've done moving forward compared to the first 6 games of the season. Davey, they've been down in second halves, yes. The offense has then turned it on, and then the complete performance happened on Saturday. Maybe I'm putting too much on Kentucky, but I think Georgia's the cream of the crop, and they'll be the number 1 seed at the end of this.
In terms of talent, they are still number 1 in the country. And while I still have some reservations about Carson Beck and whether he can get it done, they put up 51 points against a team that was argued to have a really, really good defense in the SEC. I'm with you, Hutton. I've got Georgia number 1. They haven't lost since the SEC championship game against Alabama in 2021. And until they give me reason to doubt them, I can't pick against them. And so it looks, I mean, right now, all things considered, you got them back in the college football playoff for the 3rd straight year.
I do. That good teams improve, great teams improve to that elite category, and Georgia seems to be on that trajectory.
They're the new Alabama.
Yeah, they have been. They have been, right? So my top 4, Georgia at number 1, Michigan at number 2. At number 3, Washington, the Huskies jumping into the college football playoff for me compared to my preseason pick of Oregon. And give me Texas, who I think wins in a rematch of the Big 12 title game against Oklahoma. I've got the Longhorns in it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how all this is going to play out. But, yeah, my 4, I've got the Ducks at 4, the Nittany Lions at 3, the Sooners at 2, and the Bulldogs at number 1.
What a run that would be for James Franklin. He needs that.
The Big Ten East.
He needs
I mean,
that.
right
He'd get
now,
another big raise, too, if he had that.
I would say it's on par as far as just interesting to watch compared to what the Pac-12 is going for right now. Like that's where the fight's at.
Jim Nagy's about to join us. He's the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, scouting the country for next year's NFL draft process. Looking at what he's just sent me, he wants to preview USC Notre Dame and the talent that we're going to see in the NFL next year that will be on display Saturday night. That's next.
I'm here at the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, but that's not the only big race that's on people's minds. Let's go talk about it.
There's no way Biden can win again. There's just no way. Even the people that voted for him because they didn't like Trump now at least have to see like senile, not all there. Probably won't be alive for 4 more years.
Are you a Trump guy? Or are you a DeSantis guy? Or someone else?
I don't like any of them.
Who's your dream candidate? Who would you want to run?
Myself. I think the best candidates probably are smart enough not to run.
I just hope there's somebody that's young enough to care about the country instead of their politics.
My fear is they get Gavin Newsom from California. And I think it would be the new cool vote for the younger people, and that's what I don't like.
Who do you think on the Republican side would be able to take on Gavin Newsom?
Great question. As a Republican registered, I love what Trump's body of work did, but they're just out to get him and destroy him, and we won't get things done, which is crappy for me to say. I thought DeSantis was going to be the guy. Trump only has 4 years left. He cannot fix everything that just happened in 4 years. And he's going to be battling indictments and all these false stuff for the next 4 years. We won't get anything done. And it'll just be the stalemate in America. That's why I almost don't want him in. But if he is the leading candidate, that's who I'm going to vote for.
Is there any Democrat that you would vote for, consider voting for?
Absolutely not.
What about RFK Jr.?
No.
Who should our first female president be?
Michelle Obama, of course. Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to go with Harambe 2024.
We have the 2024 presidential race coming up, and I wanted to see who you thought your favorite TV characters would vote for. Homer Simpson, like who do you think he would vote for?
Donald Trump, all the way.
Vito Corleone.
Whoa. Whoever advances the cause of the Corleone family. Yeah.
Tony Soprano. If Tony Soprano is voting in the 2024 election, who do you think he's voting for?
I'm going to go Ron DeSantis.
Okay, why do you think that?
Just seems like a Ron DeSantis kind of guy.
Is this a meatball joke that you're trying to make right now? What about Homer Simpson?
Homer would vote for Biden because he's a dope.
Who do you think Napoleon Dynamite would vote for?
That's a good question. I actually don't know.
There's a right answer here.
He's voting for himself or Pedro. There's a Viking show, I think.
Okay.
Maybe that's Hulu. I don't know.
So in the Viking show, whatever the main character is, who do you think they would vote for in 2024?
Probably a goat or a dog.
I think we have one of those in office right now. So who do you think Jon Snow would vote for in this upcoming election?
I'm going to say Donald J. Trump.
Why do you think so?
because Game of Thrones is all about drama, and Trump comes with the drama, baby.
Would you vote for Trump from jail?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. Because at that point, what else do you have to lose?
Okay, would you vote for Trump from a jail cell?
Yeah, baby, I will get Trump out of jail.
Would you vote for Trump in jail?
Oh, yeah.
Based as
The thing that Trump needs to remember is there's another political figure that said, I don't recall very well.
Yeah.
And that's all he's got to say.
Is there like a dream candidate, someone that you think could like save us all?
Yeah, Jesus.
Amen to that.
Sixth and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Glad you're with us. Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick network. Withrow's back. Can't wait. He's back with us tomorrow. The Withrow retreat, the Withrow men retreat, plus fall break. Well-deserved. A couple days off there. Deserves more, quite frankly. He would say that. I'll vouch for that. Coming up, Jim Nagy about to join us from the Reese's Senior Bowl for his weekly visit. We'll get the scouting report from all of the reports and files that have been sent his way from his scouts that work exclusively for the Senior Bowl, that go to the best games in the country to see the best talent across college football each and every Saturday. NFL news from today. Justin Jefferson, top wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings, best in the league. Hamstring injury. He's headed to injured reserve. Had a second opinion, maybe a third opinion. He said he was going to get multiple opinions before they decided to shut him down for at least a portion of this season. And that leaves the Vikings in a really bad shape. They're already 1-4. They're already in bad shape. But Jefferson leads the Vikings in receiving by a lot. 570 yards. That's more than T.J. Hawkinson and Jordan Addison combined. And he's averaging 10-plus yards per target. That's well over 2.5 yards better than any other Vikings receiver. And now the upcoming matchups for Minnesota. 3 games against Chicago, against San Francisco, and against Green Bay. At 1-4, where is their record going to be at Halloween? Because that is the NFL trade deadline. Those are the 3 opponents that lead you into October 31st. And they're in a division where they're competitive. Record-wise, they're not. They just lost in overtime to Kansas City. And 27-20 in that loss, a win would be maybe fool's gold. Maybe not so much, because Green Bay lost last night on the road against the Raiders. My point, though, they still feel like they're extremely competitive. And they have been. They're just not winning games the way they won games last year. Tight window ball games, one-possession games, winning 13 games a year ago. They're not headed down that path. Do they feel like they can be a backdoor contender for a wild card spot? Maybe. But I think at some point, and maybe it takes 2 more losses out of these 3, maybe it's just 1, depending on not if you lose, but how you lose and who you lose to. Playing San Francisco doesn't look great. They're on the road against Chicago this coming week. That could be a tell-all, quite frankly, because it's a team you got to beat. And it's a Vikings team that should be winning more than they're losing to this point, and they've just lost their top receiver and top player on their roster. Does that mean they're going to be trading away some talent? Specifically, Kirk Cousins is who I'm referring to, because they have the final year of his contract. He's not going to be back. We know that just based on the salary cap, based on the money it would take to bring him back. And also, just think about the money that's allocated already to Hawkinson with the extension. They also just they know they're going to pay a mega contract to Jefferson. And they've allocated some funds on defense as well. That's where they also need some more improvement. It's not going to be with Cousins. So are they going to be a trade deadline seller? Possibly. A buyer needs to be the Kansas City Chiefs. Van Jefferson today traded to the Atlanta Falcons. Cooper Kupp's return in L.A. facilitated this, but really Jefferson was a non-factor even when Kupp wasn't in the game or not allowed to play based on being on IR due to his injury. You see they flip picks in the late round picks in 2025 for this. But Puka Nacua, his emergence allowed Jefferson to be the odd man out. Tutu Atwell is also in the mix there. And so Atlanta trades for Van Jefferson. And I bring up Atlanta because he's joining a group of receivers that are a lot like, well, Van Jefferson, at least production-wise. And a group that's a lot like Van Jefferson as well, production-wise, is in Kansas City. I think the Chiefs need to be buyers at the deadline for the wide receiver position. Atlanta's trying to improve on what we've seen from Desmond Ridder. They did that this past week against Houston. Dead wrong on that prediction, by the way. I'll fall on the sword for that. Wide receivers, though, in Kansas City, they've combined for 2 touchdown catches this season. The wide receiving core, they're missing the true number one group, the true number one guy. Tyreek Hill had somewhere around 115 catches 2 years ago, 9 or 10 touchdowns that year. Juju Smith-Schuster had 3 touchdowns, but nearly 80 catches a year ago for Kansas City. And no, I'm not putting Kelsey in this group. Kelsey is the known factor. They need the other outlet. The Chiefs wide receivers combined for 65 yards on 7 catches against the Jets. And you've got Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes who are just not getting that type of production from the guys who are paid to give them production. Bigger pay does not mean more production. Case in point is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's the $10 million per year player. Sky Moore, they invest heavily in him in the draft. Rashee Rice, who has been good, but again, role player. Kadarius Toney, traded for him last year, should be better. 9 catches for 57 yards. And then Richie James, again, just role player at best. They need the consistent player week to week. And I think the Chiefs are not that juggernaut because they don't have that consistent player like we've seen in past years if Kelsey's either A, not available, or B, taken away. We say hello to Jim Nagy of the Reese's Senior Bowl, who jumps into the mix. Jim, always great to see you, man. Hope things are well.
Yeah, everything's good, man. Good to see you again.
Yeah, man. So
welcome back.
Oh, yeah, great to be back. Great to always have you back on the show. Let's dive into what the week is going to look like for you coming up, scouting-wise, because you mentioned this a couple weeks back. Hey, you've got some conference matchups that you're diving into, and the conference play certainly allows you to scout more of the top program talent. Notre Dame, USC comes to mind. Washington and Oregon as well. I know you'll have eyes on both of those games.
Yeah, it's a couple good ones. You're right. We're getting a better look at some of these Power 5 programs now that they're playing each other. It's going to take everything I can not to get on a plane and go to Seattle. You know, that was That was my last job before coming here to the Senior Bowl, out there with the Seahawks. So that's going to be a hard one to stay away from with Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix. Huge matchup, big college football playoff ramifications in that game. A lot of star power, a lot of playmakers. So that should be a fun one. Unlike USC, and we'll touch on them too in the Notre Dame matchup. Both the Oregon defense and Washington's defense both have NFL guys on them. And USC's does too, but the other 2 units are just playing better. Should be a really good matchup. And then Notre Dame and USC. Again, this is a really pivotal game for Notre Dame to bounce back. They've been in a couple close ones. You know, they pulled out the Duke win. They lose to Louisville, so a really big bounce back opportunity. Sam Hartman's got to play better, and they got to play better around Sam. And then for USC, they've had a couple close ones against Colorado, and then last week in overtime against Arizona, which a lot of people probably didn't expect. Arizona kind of took them right down there to the wire. Jed Fish's team is improving. That's a much better Arizona team than we've seen in past years, but USC came through. So this will be a big one. That'll be a fun game as well. A couple of really good ones.
Halfway Heisman discussion right now. Who catches your eye and why?
Well, a lot of those names we just said, I think you can start with Bo Nix, Penix, the reigning Heisman winner, Caleb Williams will be in that mix for sure. You could probably throw Jaden Daniels in there from LSU. He's playing at a really high level. A couple of the losses probably hurt him. If you're going non-quarterback, we were talking about that in the office today. If you go non-quarterback, who is it? There's not like a running back who's just had a bust-out year. There's really not a receiver. There's a lot of good ones.
Yeah.
But you really have to have one of those special years to kind of be a non-quarterback at this point. And maybe that guy's Brock Bowers. Maybe he's the rare tight end. I don't know if we've seen that. I was trying to rack my brain on that. When was the last time we've seen a tight end in the mix for the Heisman? So, but he's had a couple of really good games back-to-back against Auburn, which I was there for, witnessed that one in person, and then just got done watching the tape of that Kentucky game the other day, and he was really good in that. He did drop a touchdown late in the game. I was shocked. You never see that guy drop anything, but it'd be cool. It'd be cool to see Bowers in the mix.
So in all of your years of scouting, how many players do you come across, Jim, where you could, that guy could go pro after 1 year of college? That was the discussion about Bowers. Had he been eligible, many thought he would go and he'd be a first-round pick. How often does that happen?
Not often. I mean, you're talking once every 5-10 years you might see a guy. And really, it's about the physical development more so than the skill level. Some guys are skilled enough. They're just not big and strong enough at that point to their bodies to withstand a 17-game schedule. So, Adrian Peterson comes to mind, guys like that, but there hasn't been many. I was actually at a game Bowers freshman year against South Carolina. My son was up there with me on a little recruiting trip. It was the day Arch Manning was there on his recruiting trip.
Okay.
Oscar Delp, who's now their backup tight end behind Bowers, was there that day. But yeah, he was close, man. I mean, he was physically capable of doing it. And I remember talking to guys that day in the building about Bowers, and that they knew they had something. They knew they had something really good when they recruited him, but just watching that ball out there in Napa, California, they didn't know truly what it would look like once they got him on campus. But he announced himself pretty quickly on what he was going to be in college football.
Jim Nagy with us, executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. A player in the league that you're familiar with, Brock Purdy. I'm done hearing the critics tell me that Purdy is just this system guy. And it's not just based on one win. It's just that every time I watch him play, Jim, accurate, smart with the football, making plays. He finds the right play. Maybe more importantly, he keeps them out of the wrong play. And he wins. He's a baller. If it were that easy to just drop into Shanahan's system, Trey Lance would be great. And he's not.
Well, Trey certainly didn't really have an opportunity. Brock kind of stole his opportunity from him, right? Brock's the guy. Again, we blew it on him here. I didn't invite him to the Senior Bowl, so that's a huge bad mark on my record.
Well, everyone passed on him except for San Fran in the final pick too. I mean, again, it's amazing what we've seen from him.
And what you try to do is learn from your mistakes, right? I mean, last year's game, 2 years ago, we had, Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell and Kenny Pickett, a bunch of guys that are starting quarterbacks. Malik Willis was in that game. Bailey Zappi was in that game, went in the fourth round. So again, and we take input from the teams, but I'm not shying away. That's my mistake. But where I've learned from that is Brock played whatever it was, 46 career starts, 45 career starts, played a ton of football. Something I always look at with quarterbacks is, do they elevate the guys around them, right? Like, do they take a program that typically shouldn't go certain places and they take them there, like Desmond Ridder did at Cincinnati, taking the first group of 5 team to a college football playoff. And Brock Purdy got Iowa State to a Big 12 championship game. And now you look at what Iowa State's been the last couple of years without him. I mean, they've fallen off. And I think Matt Campbell's a phenomenal coach. It's a great program, what he's built there. But they're not the same without Brock. So those are some lessons for me, like going back to guys' experience level, how many big games have they played in? Have they elevated a program? Brock did all that. So, and he's doing it in San Fran. You can say all you want about supporting cast. I mean, then they have all that. They have a defense. They have skilled players. But he's making it all go right now.
Before I ask the final, can you stick around through the break, or do you have to go right here?
No, I'm good.
Okay, we got a final minute here on this, though. I'm going to just tie in Purdy and the invites. Guys have to accept the invite, too. I get that. How many quarterbacks are you looking at and considering, Jim, for the Senior Bowl, and how many spots are you actually inviting?
Well, we'll probably invite 6 this year. We've had as many as 8.
Okay.
And what that does is it can take away from reps. Like we want to have these guys have as many reps as possible. So I haven't really decided where we're going to land this year because it's a really big class.
It is.
From a volume perspective. I think we're pretty locked in on about 4 or 5 of them right now. And now we're just trying to decide like who's going to get either that final spot or those final 3 spots. And again, we will definitely include the NFL in those conversations and see where they're at with this class as well. But I think there's 4 or 5 that are pretty safe that we feel good about.
Jim Nagy's the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. He'll stick around with us coming up. He spent some time in his career in New England. Got to ask about what we're seeing right now and Mac Jones and Belichick. And, man, it's wild to see it on the opposite end of things now in Foxborough. We'll also get back into some of the better college matchups this weekend and some senior takes that have a chance to be in Mobile and on their way to the NFL next April. Stay tuned. More coming right here on Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
There's no doubt in my mind he could have caught the ball in his back pocket if he'd been running. Blowing a lead and losing a game is 100 times more lasting and painful in some clubhouses than losing the game 15-0. If I had to start a list in the last 10 years of horrible underachievers, he's at the top.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting, that was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only 1 or 2. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Bold taste of the Southern Legend.
Glad you're with us, and what's been a fast-paced show on this Tuesday edition. Withrow back with us tomorrow. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network. Jim Nagy, our guest, Executive Director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. Jim, your time in New England, you know the Patriot way, right? You know what the type of talent everyone's looking for and how you bring in, and everyone just kind of files up in line there. Man, it looks the opposite of what I'm sure you are familiar with, based on what we've seen the start of the season. 156 yards of total offense against the Saints, 3 turnovers. Mac Jones benched for the second consecutive week. 72-3, I believe, is the combined score of the last 2 weeks. It doesn't look like there's light at the end of the tunnel either. I think people are asking, like, can it get worse? Like, yeah, I mean, Belichick's admitting they need to start over, whatever that means.
Yeah, it certainly looks different. There's no doubt. I'd say, kind of one of the trademarks of those Patriot teams that I was a part of, and I was there from 2002 to 2009, we just got the most out of our players. It was a fun place to scout because, Bill and the coaching staff, they really had clear definitions of what they looked for in certain position groups and what skill sets and what traits they wanted. And then if we went out and found them as a scouting department, they usually found a way to implement that guy on the field and get the most out of him. And, I'd say the biggest thing that sticks out is just the handling of Mac Jones. I mean, how many quarterbacks come into the league, go to a Pro Bowl their first year, take a probably averagely talented team to the playoffs as a rookie, and then have this kind of regression? I saw parts of that game on TV the other day against the Saints. And, Mac, if you've ever been around Mac Jones, he is a supremely confident guy. And that stems from his preparation. I mean, this dude he's a dying breed when it comes to being a gym rat. We saw that down here at the Senior Bowl when he was down here. We had to kick him out of the film room after midnight, 2 of the nights we were down here. So he'd go get some sleep. But he just didn't look, he looked like a shell of himself on the sidelines. He looked frustrated. He didn't look confident. Even watching him play, he didn't look confident. He was choking the ball off. He wasn't clear what he was seeing. And that's never been Mac. I mean, his first day down here at the Senior Bowl, what's made him different than any quarterback we've had in my 5 years here, including guys like Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts, is day one, Mac Jones knew where to go with the football. A lot of these guys you got to understand, they're getting a new playbook. They're trying to learn verbiage. They're getting in a huddle for the first time in their life for most of these guys. So the first day is usually pretty rocky, and scouts give those guys a kind of a pass on Tuesday. But Matt came out firing on the first day and looked great. So just to see where he's at now from where he was as a rookie playing at a high level, man, I don't know if I've ever seen anything like it.
Yeah, and you mentioned just knowing where to go with the football. I mean, it does stand out if you know where to go in that scenario on that Tuesday you're talking about. He's got, 4 pick sixes now at Gillette Stadium. There's always a Brady tie-in. That is as many as Tom Brady threw at Gillette Stadium his entire career. I mean, it's just, wow. It's crazy to think about. And he's going to be compared there because he was the 15th pick or whatever. he even fell to New England at 15, where many thought they're going to trade up in a draft where many thought that the 49ers were trading up to get him instead of Lance at the time, whenever that preseason trade, off-season trade went in. And he ends up falling directly to Bill Belichick, and everyone's just like, oh, of course. The Patriots get their guy. And the handling of him really in year 2 with the coaching staff is what is mind-boggling. It's almost like the Bill O'Brien insert was more a Robert Kraft thing than it was a Belichick thing.
Well, we talked about Brock Purdy in the last segment.
Yeah.
Look at how that played out.
That's right.
If they a lot of people thought it was going to be Mac Jones at 4 rather than or the trade up instead of Trey Lance. I thought it was going to be Mac. And again, I know some people in that building, and there was a large faction in that building that wanted it to be Mac. Now what with everything you said about Brock Purdy, and you were correct about, with him knowing where to go with the ball and smart and accurate and poised, that's all the stuff Mac is, right? But he's, Brock Purdy's playing for Kyle Shanahan, and Mac Jones is now on his 3rd coordinator in 3 years. And like you said, I mean, Matt Patricia, I worked with Matt for a long time. Great defensive coach. But I mean, how many organizations would do that? Put a guy that's never coached on one side of the ball and put him in charge of a young quarterback who's coming off a Pro Bowl. Like, the whole thing, when you say it out loud, it doesn't even make sense, especially for a guy that's as smart as Coach Belichick. So, but here we are, and it's a messy place. They're in a messy place right now.
You mentioned Bailey Zappi. What many thought that Belichick really liked him a year ago. They end up cutting him and allow him to get the waiver wire in the preseason. They get him back on the practice squad. Give me your thoughts on Zappi, the QB, and why we haven't seen him. And I know you have to be in. We don't know what the conversations are like, but they've gone back to Mac Jones now after benching him in a week after Dallas. At what point do you think Zappi gets his turn, and does he have the skill set to be that guy?
Well, I think you got to ride it out with Mac a little longer and see where this goes. Because again, in the big scheme of things, they're in a new offense, right? Like everyone, yes, Bill O'Brien was there for a long time, and I was there with him all the years that Bill was there. We were there together. So it feels like Bill's been a Patriot, but he was out of the building for like 15 years. Like, this is, he knows his way around the building, but these players don't know Bill O'Brien. So I think they got to give Mac a little more time. And Bailey honestly has a lot of the same skill set. Like I said, that being a gym rat's a dying breed. Bailey is too. Like, Bailey's a football junkie. He studies it. Coming out of college, I don't think people gave Bailey enough credit for his arm strength. He's probably got a little stronger arm than Mac. And he had success last year, man. I mean, he did. He went 2-0 as a starter. I think he was the only guy in the Super Bowl era, only rookie quarterback to go 2-0 in his first 2 games with like 125 quarterback rating. And there was some other stat thrown in there, but like a crazy stat that had never happened before. And it happened with Bailey. So at some point, if this thing doesn't rebound, they're going to have to go to him. And then I think if you're the Patriots, you got to figure out, okay, if Mac's certainly not the guy, then let's audition. Let's give Bailey a long enough audition to see if he is the guy. And then if he's not, you're probably in a place where you're going to be able to draft maybe not a Caleb Williams or a Drake May. Maybe you are, but maybe you're in a position to take Bo Nix or Jaden Daniels. But that's something they're going to have to figure out. And it's just crazy sitting here 2 years removed from Mac Jones going to the Pro Bowl as a rookie that we're talking about scenarios where they would be drafting another quarterback.
Totally agree. Jim Nagy with us. Final thing, Jim, and just going back to college scouting for a moment, and the factors into the Senior Bowl. In the league, the last couple of years, I think line play has really regressed. With the extra COVID year, maybe that's played a factor in guys not going pro early. Maybe not. But I'm curious, the extra year on the fronts, in the trenches, especially on offense, how much is that going to help a guy's case? Guys that you're scouting right now that have that decided to come back for that extra year instead of go out early and enter the league in this past draft, maybe a change of position, maybe proving you can play more than just an inside spot. How often do you see a guy progress as, he kind of reaches the body type that the NFL is looking for?
Well, you hit on one point, and guys are certainly staying in more. We've seen that with the junior numbers. They peaked back in 2019. There was like 140-some juniors that came out in that draft in 19. This past year, it was down in the 70s. It's almost been cut in half. So, so the NIL has really helped keep these guys in school. And I would say, just big picture, why that's, I mean, we're seeing it across the league, right? Every week you turn on the Giants or, whoever we're watching, they can't protect the quarterback.
It's in every game. I think it's in every game.
Daniel Jones is getting killed back there. I mean, some of these games we're watching. So to me, what it goes back to is the last CBA that they did in the National Football League. And again, I understand why the players wanted it, right? But there's 14 padded practices during a season. So that's less than one a week on average that you can put pads on. So yes, and that's why we're seeing great skill play around the league, great receivers, great cornerback play from these young guys, because you can play 7-on-7 all you want. Where we're seeing the regression in football right now is in the trenches because they can't bang. They can't. How do you hone your craft when you really can't do your craft? And right now in the NFL, in the offseason, you think they're putting pads on in the spring and in training camp? No, they're not. So you get to the games and there's no cohesion. You can walk through you can't walk through offensive and defensive line play. So it's not going to get better. So for these young guys, and I haven't even really thought about this, but like these young offensive linemen playing college football route and D linemen, like it behooves them to stay in and get as many physical, aggressive, violent reps as they can possibly get, because when they get to the National Football League, they're just not going to get them.
That's a great point. And what amazes me, you mentioned that how many maximum 14 padded practices during the season. A lot of coaches don't even use them. You know, they don't even come, like they'll use 9 or 10 of them. And then you mentioned when you can actually hone your craft, preseason games, those dudes aren't out there but longer than 2 or 3 series at best on average. I don't understand the approach knowing the results that we're seeing.
No, and again, the CBA was done years ago.
Yeah.
It's hurt the on-field product. It really has. I understand why a lot of things were put in place, player safety, rest, recovery. I get it. And maybe we just have to live with it. But the actual on-field product probably peaked 10 years ago, especially on the lines.
Well, now the mobile quarterbacks, it's crazy how the league has changed. It's more of the college influence, and it certainly affected that because we're not running the football as much. And
that's the other thing, Jonathan. That's the other point. We were talking about this the other day. I was talking about this with the GM, and we were talking about quarterbacks. They get rushed on the field now, so there's no time to wait. So in order, that if you draft them high, you're going to be playing them. And if you play them, they have to know what they're doing. So that's why you're seeing all these college concepts pulled up. It's because we're trying to rush quarterbacks on the field. And if they've got to know what they're doing. They can't learn our playbook. We got to pull some stuff up from what they were doing at college. And so that's where you've seen it, be kind of pulled up and pros stealing from the pros stealing from the college guys is because the quarterbacks are getting rushed on the field, and that's bad for development too.
No doubt.
So we're talking about bad development on the line, or we're talking about bad development at quarterback.
Jim, it's always great, man. Where are you headed this weekend?
To be determined right now. It was going to be South Carolina. I'm still kind of weighing through that. I'm really like fighting myself not to get on a plane and go to Seattle and watch that UW Oregon.
Well, odds right now, percentage chance you hit the flight and you go there.
It's probably 50-50.
Okay, you're going then. You're going.
I gotta have that talk with my wife. So we'll see.
So it's 51-49 is what I hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, here's hoping you get to go to that game, man.
All right. Good to be on with you again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate you. Jim Nagy, excellent at what he does, and so is the Senior Bowl. I've maintained now for several years. The difference is glaring in what you get out of the combine compared to what you get out of the Senior Bowl and the production and the time spent with players. You have the interviews behind the scenes. You can do anything. You can, as a player, you can go talk to all 32 teams now at the Senior Bowl. You can do that as a car wash, of course, with the combine too. But half the time, number one, you're not in pads at the combine. And number two, half the time the guys aren't participating in those drills. If the player accepts the invite to the Senior Bowl, they're there to play and impress. I really like what he's done there in Mobile. Davey, do you have an update on the computer there of the Astros game by chance?
Last I checked, it was 5-0.
Okay. So
Astros.
it is. So it remains 5-0. Bottom 5.
Yes, bottom of the 5th.
Astros got up 4-0 in the first.
Yes, bottom of the 5th, still 5-0.
How about the Twins, man?
2 on, 1 out.
Great series too. Orioles, not playing like my O's.
I mean, I found the reason why they're not playing
Go
well.
ahead.
It's the Rangers, man. They've figured it out. They have there's a certain band. They have decided that we're going to make sure we're just going to rally around them. But the Rangers, I'm all in. That's my new AL team. They're rallying around Creed.
Okay, it's not Sweet Caroline.
They even have secret handshakes around. I don't know. It's like higher. They just go to the highest high five as possible with arms wide open. They're a chest bump. I don't know, but it's working for them, and I'm on board with them as well.
Jim Nagy is going to Seattle, and in order to see Creed,
Home
Davey can't go.
now.
He can't go to a cruise. He's got to go watch a Rangers game. Back at it tomorrow. Hot Mike with Hutton Withrow starts at 3 o'clock Eastern.